Welcome everybody to the EDC. Yep, we're going to get to our just welcoming and thank you TWA. We're going to start officially our Economic Development Committee hearing today. I feel like saying last call for boarding on the plane today as we go to City Hall. This is an exciting venue, and I think all the council members are excited to come here today and talk about the great topic of tourism here in New York City. So good afternoon, welcome. My name is Paul Balloon, and I have the privilege of co-chairing this hearing along with Jimmy Van Bramer, our Chair of Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations. And I'd like to extend my thanks to the council members on both committees as well as the administration for coming together for this hearing. I'd also like to thank the TWA hotel team for generally offering this truly fantastic space for us to discuss many of the issues on tourism in our great city. The concept of today's hearing is a direct result of our meeting held just this past September at the offices of the Times Square Alliance. I'd like to thank Councilmember Powers for spearheading that meeting and inviting myself and Councilmember Van Bramer to help lead the conversation with several of the cultural institutions and urban planners that are seated in front of us today. I would like to specifically thank the Center for an Urban Future for putting together their report, Destination New York, and for peeling back the curtain on the city's robust tourism economy. The purpose of today's hearing is to discuss the economic impact that tourism has on our city, its rise over the last several years, and the ways in which tourists navigate the city's infrastructure to visit our diversity of cultural attractions. It is also my hope that we can further grow the EDC and the committee's role in supporting, funding, and continuing the growth of our great tourism industry. When tourists come to New York, they think of the iconic skyscrapers, Broadway shows, and our many museums, galleries, restaurants, and other institutions. Instead, they're sometimes faced with the perpetually delayed airport, not here, subway and transit infrastructure, and non-existent or hard-to-find signage or directions to guide them. While we on the committees recognize the importance of tourism dollars to the city's economy, it sees that the administration treats tourism as a blend of several other industries and does not measure income earned through the tourism as distinct from other sectors of our economy. We think this is a mistake. The mayor's new jobs plan, New York Works, is slated to create 100,000 good-paying jobs across 5 industries over the next 10 years. But tourism is notably excluded. While the New York Works plan does partner with employees in the hospitality and food service sectors, those jobs can cater just as easily to local residents as they can to tourists. The city's official tourism marketing organization, New York City & Company, encourages tourists to visit New York City through global marketing initiatives and the membership of nearly 2,000 New York-based organizations. Despite New York City being the largest tourism economy in the United States, with a total economic impact of $65 billion in 2017, and an increase of 2.3 million visitors over the last full year on record, the city only allocates a mere $21.2 million to New York City & Company in its budget. That number has not changed since at least fiscal year 2016. For comparison, American cities that compete with New York for tourism dollars, such as Las Vegas, Orlando, and Los Angeles, all spend significantly more in tourism marketing. And when measured per capita, cities like Denver outshine New York in their tourism spending nearly by 10 times. Nonetheless, New York has a steady increase in tourists over the past 15 years. Since 2002, the total visits to New York has nearly doubled, and New York City & Company projects that we are on track for a record 65 million tourists this year. While significant strides have been made to accommodate this influx of tourists, such as expanding the city's hotel capacity, increasing jobs in hospitality, retail, and food services, and making long-term upgrades to the city's transit infrastructure, more remains to be done. JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia airports consistently ranked among the 10 worst airports in the nation, both for flight delays and passenger experience. Neighborhoods where tourists congregate, such as Hell's Kitchen, complain about consistent overcrowding on the sidewalks and pedestrian areas. And double-decker tour buses clog the streets of Manhattan, impacting the flow of traffic and disrupting the daily lives of New Yorkers. Furthermore, there is limited reporting on how tourists spend their time and money while visiting the city. While we have some general ideas about the attractions and eateries that tourists tend to visit, we as a council believe that there is more information available regarding how tourism dollars are being spent, about the types of jobs and salaries that New Yorkers have in the tourism section, and about the overall trajectory of tourism's economic impact on our city. For these reasons, I, along with Councilmember Powers and my co-chair, Councilmember Van Bramer, have sponsored Introduction 1276 before the committee today. Once again, this is a result of the recommendations contained in the report released by the Center for an Urban Future. This bill would require an entity designated by the mayor to create a website that publishes information about the impact of tourism on the city's economy. This would be our very first tourism economy dashboard. which would include information about consumer spending by both visitors and residents in tourism-related industries, as well as information about employment in the tourism sector. It is also my hope that this can become the site every tourist or visitor will use for information on all of our great city's attractions, shows, events, and cultural institutions. We hope today's discussion will provide us with an opportunity to hear the administration's plans to address these ongoing structural and transparency concerns regarding the tourism industry, and what, if anything, we as a council can do to assist the administration in making the city a more accessible and enjoyable place for tourists. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the council members that are here today. We have co-chair council members Van Bramer, council members Menchaca, Adams, Borelli, Powers, Rosenthal, Moyer, Richards, and Cumbo. I'd also like to thank the Economic Development Committee staff, Legislative Council, Alex Polinoff, our policy analyst Emily Forgione, our finance analyst Aaliyah Ali for the hard work putting this hearing together. I'd also like to thank Bill Drafter Janan Zilka for turning around this critical piece of legislation very quickly. And finally, I'd like to reiterate my sincere appreciation to Chris Betts, who we met today, and Eric Palmer, and Eric Gerard, and the rest of the TW Hotel team for giving us this chance to hold this hearing in such an iconic setting. Once again, thank you for that. And I think all the council members share our excitement for being here today. With that said, I'd like to turn over the floor to my co-chair, Councilmember Jimmy Van.
Thank you very much, Councilmember and Co-Chair Vallone. It's been great, this partnership with Councilmember Powers and yourself and myself. Thank you, Councilmember Powers, for being such a leader on this issue. And Councilmember Vallone spoke briefly about it, but let's all just take a moment to take in the setting. How different it is from any other hearing that I've ever been a part of. And Fred, you look like you should be having a cocktail on that bench. It's not exactly the typical witness stand that we're associated with. But this is great, so thank you, TWA Hotel, for giving us this opportunity. And obviously, we're thrilled to partner on the legislation with Councilmember Vallone and Councilmember Powers, but also on this hearing. And the meeting that we had a couple of months ago indeed was important to all of us. I want to just talk a little bit, of course, because Paul said so much about the issue and about the legislation that I think is really critical. But as the Chair of Cultural Affairs, it is incredibly important that we recognize the indispensable role that culture and the arts plays in our tourism industry and, of course, the greater economy of the city. And just some thoughts on that. Having gone to see a Broadway play just this past Saturday, Lifespan of a Fact, written by Sunnyside, Jeremy Carrigan. If you haven't already seen The Lifespan of a Fact, I encourage you to see that, written by a Queens guy. We know that theaters, performing arts venues, and the city's cultural institutions saw an increase from 17.5 million visitors in 2006 to 23.2 million visitors in 2016. And we know it continues to grow. Broadway, the Great White Way, contributed more than $12.6 billion to the economy, and 6 million tickets, or 62.5% of all tickets, in the 2017-2018 Broadway season were purchased by tourists, showing that the industry is one of the greatest tourist attractions in New York City. And as I said, because I think the last time we all met, I had just gone to see Head Over Heels on Broadway, and the number, you do, you know, the gays like Broadway, Paul. Just saying, musical theater, at least some people in the audience get that. So my husband and I sit there, and you listen to all of the accents of all the folks who are around you, whether they're Italian or Dutch or from the South or the Midwest, showing that just so many people are coming to see our Broadway shows, and of course our cultural institutions are from out of town. Meanwhile, the cultural institutions themselves, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and MoMA, report that 73% of their annual visitors are from tourists. As a result of increased tourism in Brooklyn and Manhattan alone, employment at museums has increased over 81% within the past 15 years, and the city's arts and cultural institutions now attract visitors in all 5 boroughs, and of course Queens, Councilmember Vallone and I would agree, is essentially the center of the world. Yeah, Brooklyn was yesterday, no?
Put me down for questions.
So, as I know so many members would agree, the ticket sales from institutions and of course Broadway are not the only way that we support the economy. The museum and theater related jobs are incredibly important, but so too is the fuel for the local restaurants that host the before and after dining, as well as the transportation industry, sightseeing, tour boats, buses, public transportation, and of course hotels. So we know how important culture and the arts are to this. We want to amplify that, and I think our work and our legislation can only help. The dashboard can only help to quantify that. I want to thank Jonathan Bowles and the Center for Urban Future for all their groundbreaking work, not just here, but of course, as we've said before, all the reports on culture and the arts and libraries. They just always are right and always talking about things that matter to New Yorkers and the lives of New Yorkers. Tim Tompkins and Fred Dixon and so many folks who've done so much work over the years in these areas. We thank them for their partnership. And lastly, I want to thank Matt Wallace, my Chief of Staff, Jack Bernadovitz, my Legislative Director, our Committee Counsel, Brenda McKinney, Legislative Policy Analyst, Christy Dwyer, and our Principal Financial Analyst, Alia Ali, for her amazing work on our committee over the years. And with that, I will hand it back over to my co-chair and look forward to Tim's and others' very relaxed testimony on that very comfortable looking bench.
All right, now I'd like to turn it over to, well, it's been joined by Councilmember Paulina Rivera, and I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Keith Powers for some words about Intro 1276. Keith?
About time Manhattan got the microphone. Thank you. Oh, Manhattan, you know. There we are. Thank you. It's good to see everybody that's here. I want to thank Chair Vallone and Chair Van Bramer for hosting this. We, a few months ago, and many of you were there, hosted a roundtable at the offices of Times Square Alliance on tourism with different leaders from the tourism industry throughout the city. That was those who work in the city government around tourism, culture institutions, hotels, bids, so many more that were represented at that event. And that was an opportunity to have a conversation about a way forward. And we wanted to do a hearing, but wanted to hear from voices first in the wake of a report that came out that was mentioned earlier that talked about how tourism is really central to our economy here in New York City. At that, we talked about a need to create a comprehensive citywide tourism platform and a plan forward, because while we have so many implicit things as part of the city's budget and our goals here to encourage tourism, we think that having something more explicit would also be helpful and help demonstrate the value and the need for a encourage investment in tourism. So that happened a few months ago, and I know right after that, Chair Malone and Chair Van Bramer said we should do a hearing. Little did I know we'd be sitting on the 86th floor having such a wonderful venue as that. I believe, and this is the reason we have a bill here today, that we need to make tourism a real focus, and it's a driver of our economy. We need to expand it beyond some of the iconic destinations that reside in that beautiful Manhattan Island, and of course bring it to other parts of Manhattan where it isn't today, and to the other districts that are all represented here today. To help steer the city in that direction, we have a bill, Intro 1276 today, that would create a sort of dashboard and a report of tourism stats throughout the city. That actually is a recommendation that came right out of the roundtable that we had. This would present data on tourism jobs, trends, and salaries. In addition, it would show metrics on a neighborhood and borough basis, making it easier to identify potential areas of job growth. We look forward to hearing the testimony today on both the bill and also on the metrics and ways that we can make that bill work for the city to be able to demonstrate the need and the value around tourism, and to create a broader tourism plan from that data. We all, I think, believe it's a vital and growing part of New York City's economy. I'm glad we're giving it the attention it deserves today. I want to thank Chair Vallone, I think it was, who chose the 86th floor for this. It's wonderful. But I really want to say thank you to the stakeholders, and I do think this represents a good process. We bring people in, we listen to them, we talk about it, and then we try to move forward with some plans on that. So I really thank the chairs for putting that process into place, and want to thank everybody here for being here. Thanks.
Thank you, Council. And that's truly what happened. That's truly what happened. We got together and we listened. You know, and Mom and Dad always said, listen, and then lead from there. And that's what we did. And that's what today's all about. So, Matthew, I'd like to raise your right hand. So we're going to swear in our Executive Vice President, Matthew Kwartenowicz. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony today, to respond honestly to council members' questions?
I do.
All right. Begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairs Vallone and Van Bramer, and members of the Economic Development and Cultural Affairs Committee. My name is Matthew Kwartenowicz, and I'm an Executive Vice President of Asset Management at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, known as EDC. I'm pleased to be here today to talk about the many ways in which EDC's projects contribute to New York City's rich cultural experience for residents and for tourists alike. After my testimony, I will be glad to take any questions that you may have. Every year, New York City welcomes more than 60 million visitors from every corner of the globe. They come for our premier cultural and historical attractions, from Harry Potter on Broadway to Ellis Island, our phenomenal food scene, which can be found in all 5 boroughs, and iconic New York City sites, such as the Empire State Building and the Brooklyn Bridge. But without question, New York City continues to attract a record number of tourists, in part because of our transportation systems, our infrastructure, and our economic development projects. As a steward of the city's economy, EDC supports tourism in several different ways. For example, Port NYC advances the development of the city's passenger and freight transportation terminals, which sustain the region's economic growth. Through Port NYC, EDC manages transportation infrastructure, which includes both JFK and LaGuardia's leases, the city's 2 cruise terminals in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and the downtown and East 34th Street heliports. These pieces of infrastructure are critical to ensuring that tourists have multiple access points to New York City. Overseeing the city's leases of JFK and LaGuardia airports is a tremendous undertaking. The Port Authority is our tenant in those leases, and they are responsible for the airport's day-to-day operations. In 2012, we provided $7 million in financial incentives that made JetBlue's expansion at Terminal 5 possible. In 2016, we worked with the Port Authority and MCR Development to secure necessary approvals to allow the defunct TWA terminal to be redeveloped into JFK's first on-airport hotel. We have also consistently advocated for the full funding of NextGen Air, which is the FAA-led proposal to modernize the nation's air transportation system. Once implemented, it will increase the safety, efficiency, capacity, predictability, and resiliency of American aviation overall. And it would help ease air congestion and reduce flight delays at city airports. EDC also oversees the Brooklyn and Manhattan cruise terminals, which welcome over 1 million visitors annually. This makes New York City one of the largest cruise ports in the country. Port NYC selected Ports America as the new operator for the cruise terminals, which is slated to bring in over $58 million of private capital improvements, allowing our facilities to reach their full capacity. This momentum also helped us secure a major agreement with Norwegian Cruise Line, which guarantees that more than 6 million of the line's passengers will visit NY cruise terminals over just the next decade. This will cement New York's position as one of the country's premier cruise ports. EDC estimates that the cruise industry accounts for hundreds of millions of dollars in annual economic impact and more than 1,000 full-time jobs. We are also contributing to the visitor experience through NYC Ferry, which provides an efficient, reliable, and scenic public transportation option, all for the price of a subway ride. Our ferry system also supports job creation, as well as neighborhood growth. While NYC Ferry is primarily used by New Yorkers, we did estimate that nearly 20% of riders are tourists who seek to explore New York City neighborhoods such as Sunset Park, Long Island City, and Rockaway. Many of New York's millions of tourists spend time shopping. EDC recognizes that retail is an important source of jobs for New Yorkers and supports the growth of this sector in several ways. Our recently completed City Point project in downtown Brooklyn brought over 650,000 square feet of retail space online, which provide countless New Yorkers with job opportunities. When completed, the Empire Outlets on Staten Island will encourage tourists who take the Staten Island Ferry to explore the North Shore of Staten Island. Empire Outlets will have at least 50 retail shops and employ 1,200 New Yorkers, many through Hire NYC, and will certainly become one of the city's most trafficked shopping destinations. EDC also supports New York's rich cultural legacy. Some of our most high-profile cultural projects, including facilitating the Whitney's relocation from the Upper East Side, the restoration of the King's Theater in Brooklyn, and helping the Chocolate Factory Theater find permanent space. In 2015, the Whitney Museum opened as a result of an extensive partnership between the city and EDC. The city provided a $51.9 million capital investment in the project, and EDC provided technical assistance throughout the project's conception and its implementation. EDC also works to create new cultural areas throughout the 5 boroughs. For example, our investments in the Brooklyn Cultural District have solidified Fort Greene as a cultural hub, anchored by the Brooklyn Academy of Music. In 2015, we completed a $95 million restoration of the King's Theater in Flatbush, Brooklyn. The theater serves as a cultural hub and catalyst for economic growth in Brooklyn and has created over 100 full-time jobs. We also recently helped the Chocolate Factory Theater on the acquisition of their space in Long Island City. We also provide support to what may be the most famous New York attraction, Broadway. EDC leases 10 theaters in Times Square under a master lease to the new 42nd Street, a nonprofit established to oversee their management and their rehabilitation. The new 42nd Street was recently able to leverage this lease into a sublease and secure $100 million in investments to create an immersive retail center at the Times Square Theater. EDC also provides direct support to the new 42nd Street with $10 million in funding for theater repairs just since 2009. More recently, we assisted the Lyric Theater and the Ambassador Theater Group in their rapid transformation to bring Harry Potter and the Cursed Child to New York City. EDC and the city hold seats on the 42nd Street Historic Preservation Committee. In that role, we reviewed plans to renovate the Lyric Theater and create a more intimate setting for Harry Potter, essentially building a theater within a theater. We did our review and collaborated with the Ambassador Theater Group to make this happen on an expedited basis. I've spent most of today's testimony speaking about our work and how it contributes to the tourist experience in New York City. We're proud to support many of the city's tourist-related industries. Recognizing the impact tourism has on the city's economy, one could wonder why we did not include tourism in our New York Works job plan. The jobs plan released last year identifies industries that needed additional support and aggressive interventions to grow and expand in the city. The tourism industry in New York City is thriving as a result of our rich cultural history, plethora of sightseeing attractions, and our unique urban fabric. We're proud of our investments to make our transit options more reliable, create more retail experiences, and improve our already outstanding cultural attractions, all of which contribute to tourism. EDC recognizes the incredible value tourists bring to the city. In addition to adding to the vibrancy and dynamism of the city, they also spend money at our restaurants, shop at our stores, sleep in our hotels, and travel at our airports. We will continue to make investments that enhance the tourist experience, as well as help New Yorkers who call the city home. Thank you for your attention today, and I will now answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue on with the panel. So,
Absolutely.
in fact, when Dr. Donna Kernan, I think you're next. Why don't we just all swear everybody in at one time so you don't have to worry about that. Do you swear to affirm and tell the truth, the whole truth?
Excuse me, because President Fred Dixon is going to take the lead on
Perfect. I said, why don't we all raise our hand at the same time, and then this way you don't have to worry about doing it. And we'll start with Fred. So do you swear to affirm, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimonies today, and to respond honestly to the council members' questions? Perfect. Now let's start, Fred, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Chairman Malone, Chairman Van Bramer, to the members of the Committee on Economic Development and the Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations. My name is Fred Dixon. I'm the President and CEO of Nycc & Company, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Donna Kernan, Senior Vice President and Head of Research. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you who we are and what we do and how it directly contributes to the economic importance of tourism. NYC & Company is the official destination marketing organization for the 5 boroughs of New York City. Our mission is to maximize travel and tourism opportunities for the city and our partners, helping build economic prosperity and spreading the dynamic image of New York City around the world. Now, as a 501c6 private trade association, we represent the interests of nearly 2,000 member organizations, and together they fund about half of our operations. We also hold a procurement contract with the Department of Small Business Services to provide the City of New York with certain tourism marketing services as well. As a destination marketing organization, we use our in-house resources and our global network of representatives to drive both leisure and business travelers to the 5 boroughs. Tourism, by its very definition, is an export business as we work to bring new dollars into the market from outside, which are exchanged locally for goods and services. We compete regionally, domestically, and internationally for visitors and their spending. To generate inspiration to visit NYC, we create, curate, and promote content on dozens of neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs. We recruit meetings, conferences, conventions, and trade shows, as well as big events, which draw higher spending meeting and event delegates year-round. As part of our global outreach, we work with journalists and media outlets on 5 continents to tell the stories of New York City as an unparalleled, multicultural, vibrant, world-class destination. Now, how do we market NYC to the world? Just one example, we recently launched the latest version of our global tourism campaign, Famous Original New York City, with its affirming tagline, New York City welcomes you always. This campaign is designed to reinforce New York City's fundamental values of diversity and inclusion, along with its world-class welcoming spirit. And marketing NYC is our job, and we believe we excel at it. Travel and tourism in New York City is performing at record levels. With 62.8 million visitors last year, volume grew 3.8% and has averaged 3.7% annual growth over the last decade, which equals about 1.75 million more visitors per year on average. Direct visitor spending is the key to this growth, and last year we saw $44.2 billion spent across the 5 boroughs. Our economic impact studies show that it has been growing by almost $100 million a month, or nearly $1.2 billion a year. The full annual impact of this industry is a $66 billion economic engine when you consider both direct and indirect spending, supporting the jobs of 392,000 people who collectively earn almost $26.4 billion a year. That's an average wage of $67,300 across all sectors. And over the past 10 years, this industry has been one of the fastest growing across the city's labor force, adding 8,200 new positions in 2017 alone, and making it the 6th largest employment sector of the city. And we are on track to exceed these numbers in 2018. Jobs in the travel and tourism sector cut across lodging, food and beverage, transportation, shopping, and services. But jobs in culture and entertainment are especially important, with traveler activity and spending supporting 6 out of 10 jobs in the sector. These are among some of the higher paying positions across the city, with more than 58,300 people earning an average wage of $71,000. However, this requires a skilled tourism hospitality workforce, and we have heard this loud and clear from our industry leaders. Therefore, we support the Department of Youth and Community Development's Ladders for Leaders program and work closely with the Department of Education's Career and Technical Education program. These initiatives build a talent pipeline of New Yorkers from all walks of life for a successful career in the tourism sector. New York City is the most popular big city destination in the U.S. and the top international destination by a large margin as well. With more than 50 million domestic visitors and 13.5 million international travelers, the city's cultural and arts organizations occupy a determining place in the reasons people visit here. After lodging and food, the daily necessities, whether you're visiting or living here, culture and entertainment pull the largest share of spending by visitors to New York City. Last year, spending by visitors on culture and entertainment rose to almost $6 billion. Cultural spending by visitors is money spent on theaters, museums, all forms of live performance, zoos and gardens, museums, and many historical and cultural heritage sites around the city. While many are free or low cost at entry, gift shops and dining options benefit from the millions of visitors as well. Now, let me share some data on cultural tourism specifically. New York City welcomed over 30 million cultural visitors in 2017, nearly half of the total number of visitors, and that's up 17% from 2012. International visitors in particular are more likely to include cultural activities in their itineraries than their domestic counterparts, and you'll see us put a lot of emphasis on the international market because of that. But the unparalleled array of cultural organizations and activities across the city is often a primary reason for people's visit. Art and culture in all of its forms is well represented in the itineraries of connoisseurs and intrepid travelers alike. They are part of the city's cultural DNA as well. And ultimately, cultural activities constitute a vital part of New York City's tourism sector. Whether we're looking at people who attend a festival, a concert, or show, or people who visit a museum, gallery, historic site, or zoos and botanic gardens, they all fuel the economic engine of New York City tourism. And from the Bronx to Queens to Staten Island, the rich environment of arts organizations is at the core of the most popular tourist activities. This is in addition to the vital role these organizations play in the lives of residents, students, and even commuters to the city. As many recent economic studies have shown, the cultural organizations in any neighborhood support the energy and prosperity of small businesses around them. With this in mind, we found that many neighborhood cultural organizations and small businesses across the 5 boroughs were not prepared to take advantage of the growing tourism opportunities and needed additional training and support. And I am proud to say we met that need by launching our very own Tourism Ready program. This free program gives local businesses a better understanding of how the tourism industry works. It gives them the tools and know-how to increase footfall, work with visiting groups, secure advanced bookings, build repeat visiting business, and increase their bottom line. We will begin our 4th year of this programming in 2019, and approximately 550 small businesses and arts organizations have taken advantage of this free training. Let me share this testimonial from Sami Abu Shamay's Flushing Town Hall. Nycc Company's Tourism Ready initiative has done a really great job of beginning the process that we fully expect will draw more attention to the amazing tourism opportunities we offer in Queens. We're especially appreciative of how inclusive the process has been, welcoming anyone who wants to participate and who is willing to put in the time and effort, because it does take a lot of energy and focus, and helping us to see that we can be much more effective through collaboration rather than competition in this area. Participating in the committees and meetings has helped Flushing Town Hall develop stronger connections to our colleagues and other local Queens businesses, and ensured that our network will be strengthened further. Finally, the hands-on personal attention that our team delivers has really helped us to understand the tourist trade more deeply, made us more comfortable with the process of tourism, and pushed us to give our best to the project in a way we believe will be tremendously beneficial to Flushing and Queens overall. This is just a taste of what we do at Nycc Company. Additionally, we are the city's big events group, where we work closely with EDC in bidding for large-scale events like the Super Bowl, MLB's All-Star Game, Formula E, the WWE WrestleMania, and it's hard to imagine, but people do come from around the world to watch wrestling, and the FIFA World Cup in 2026, which is going to be incredibly exciting, and I fully expect New York to be front and center for 2026. It's going to be an amazing time. For the first time, we will host World Pride in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising here in New York City, bringing 3 million people in June of 2019 alone. And that is a big deal for all of us. We preserve the New York City brand and manage licensing agreements for the city agencies like FDNY and NYPD, and help them police those brands and promote them around the world. Another important area of our organization is research, where we track yearly visitation and develop industry insights. The team reports annually on visitor volume and spending, studies travel behavior, tracks the economic impact of the industry, and conducts custom research on key NYC visitor segments. The staff deploys a suite of proprietary forecasting and statistical tracking models to inform marketing and strategic planning decisions. And these tools help position the local travel and tourism industry in terms of market size and growth and sustainability, challenges and opportunities, and of course, traveler affinity for New York City. Because of the way economic modeling is done, these reports are typically produced on an annual basis because we take a number of inputs to make it all happen. We offer certain reports as a member benefit as well to our members that invest in our organization. And as an example of what can be compiled, we would like to share with you our latest tourism update and examples of our economic impact and cultural tourism fact sheets. And going forward, we're happy to share these reports with you on an annual basis. In regards to the proposed legislation, I look forward to working with the 2 committee chairmen and Councilmember Powers and the respective committee staff, as well as our partners at EDC and DCLA, in discussing research methodology and feasibility of the bill. In our opinion, unfortunately, the majority of the data requested at the moment does not exist or is not really available. So there's a lot of work that we will have to do ahead of us. And furthermore, there are proprietary issues because as a nonprofit, we cannot compel private corporations to remit certain data. And a lot of the data is going to come from the private sector. Again, but we do look forward to discussing this with you all in depth. Now, the tourism industry, as you've heard, and hopefully you will leave today comfortable knowing, is booming. I am proud of the role Nycc Company has played in these successes, and we value your support of the tourism industry, and I thank you all for allowing me this time to share all of our successes in promoting New York City as the most popular city destination in the United States, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Greetings, Chairman Bramer, Chair Malone, and members of the committee. My name is Pranita Raghavan. I'm the General Counsel of the Department of Cultural Affairs. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. Can you hear me? Good? Okay. The City of New York has a long history of supporting cultural institutions, starting with a 19th century partnership that has profoundly shaped our cultural landscape. The deal was that the city would provide land and additional financial support. In exchange, private groups with collections covering both art and science would turn these over to publicly accessible cultural institutions. The organizations to pioneer this model in the 1870s were the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the American Museum of Natural History. Nearly 150 years later, these two organizations see some 12 million visitors annually. Clearly, the relationship between city and institution has become a pillar of our ability to attract people from far and wide. This early partnership has grown to include the 33 members of the Cultural Institutions Group, or CIG. They represent performing arts centers, zoos, museums, and multidisciplinary spaces in all 5 boroughs. Together, these diverse organizations attracted over 23 million visitors last year. We continue to invest in this remarkable partnership with both expense and capital support. For example, under this administration, the city has allocated $78.4 million in capital funding for the American Museum of Natural History's new Gilder Center for Science, Education, and Innovation. We've also invested $54 million in the Studio Museum's new home in Harlem, marking a new chapter in this important group's history. And city expense support, which goes to operating and energy costs, is at a record high. Today, DCLA's support for culture goes far beyond the CIG, as around 1,000 nonprofit organizations receive program funding each year. Programs like Materials for the Arts and our partnership with the local arts councils reach thousands more. Our longstanding collaboration with City Council in providing this funding has fostered unprecedented levels of city support for art and culture. From itinerant dance groups to major museums, these organizations form the backbone of the cultural sector that makes New York such a powerful draw for visitors. As New York City and Company indicated in their testimony, over 30 million people visited our city specifically for culture. This is a direct result of the amazing work being done by the nonprofit cultural organizations DCLA proudly supports. Under Mayor de Blasio, we've made major investments in our city's cultural infrastructure, equaling more than $200 million in this fiscal year alone. In addition to the AMNH and Studio Museum projects in Manhattan that I mentioned earlier, the projects supported by this funding include, in Staten Island, we committed $3.1 million to upgrade the Staten Island Children's Museum, 40-year-old heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, increasing operating efficiency and improving visitor experience. In Brooklyn, we cut the ribbon on Ocean Wonders, sharks, at the New York Aquarium in Coney Island in June. This extraordinary new facility represents over $100 million in city funding. In the Bronx, the new Edible Academy at the New York Botanical Garden is a major new enhancement that will allow visitors, especially young visitors, to get their hands dirty and learn more about how food is cultivated. Mayor de Blasio was on hand for the opening of the Academy earlier this year, and just last month we announced $1.9 million in new capital funding for the Louis Armstrong House Museum in Queens to support the renovation of Selma's house next door to the Jazz Greats' former home. Alongside a new education center and jazz club across the street, also being supported by city funding, this is part of a growing cultural campus that will bring visitors and residents to the heart of Corona, Queens. These investments undergird our commitment to make sure that the many benefits of cultural activity, economic, social, educational, and more, are experienced by all New Yorkers. The Create NYC Cultural Plan, released in July 2017, gave new focus and energy to these efforts. Since the release of the plan, we've increased funding for individual artists, boosted grants for cultural organizations in underserved neighborhoods, all while continuing to invest in the large organizations that draw visitors and provide thousands of good jobs for residents from across the city. We applaud our colleagues at Nycc and Company and EDC for their work to encourage New Yorkers to explore their city and support local institutions. Cultural activity happens in every corner of the city. In addition to providing hubs for activity that ripple through the local economy, they are central to the vibrancy that makes New York so prominent in the world's imagination. As our partners at Nycc & Co. demonstrate with their in-depth research, this vibrancy translates into incredible numbers of visitors. These visitors purchase tickets that help support local artists and patronize businesses that are the backbones of our neighborhoods. We believe that art and culture are important to communities and to New York City's identity as a creative capital. People and companies continue to flock to our city because of the energy and talent that our unparalleled art scene attracts. Cultural institutions and advocacy groups often conduct studies of their visitors and the impact they have on the local economy. These studies show just how crucial these organizations are to New York's economy. For instance, the 2017-2018 Broadway theater season was the best attended and highest grossing in history according to the Broadway. This amounts to 13.8 million attendees and $1.7 billion in ticket grosses. A 2016 report found that Lincoln Center, a member of the CIG, contributed $2.4 billion to the city's economy over the course of the 2014-2015 season. This included $670 million in spending by what the report termed Lincoln Center tourists. Out-of-town audience members who indicated that Lincoln Center was a very important reason for their trip to New York City. Finally, visitors to the Met Museum in the summer of 2015 generated $946 million in spending. A single exhibition, the Michelangelo Show, that closed earlier this year, attracted over 700,000 visitors. It's clear that these cultural institutions are cornerstones of our city's tourism economy, and we're proud to be investing in them at historic levels. Commissioner Finkelkroh was thrilled to join Chair Van Bramer just last month at Flushing Town Hall to announce our largest ever city allocation for culture, with nearly $200 million in DCLA's current budget. This provides stable support for the CIG and Cultural Development Fund, and thanks to Create New York City, it also translated into substantial increases for organizations in underserved communities. Both forms of investment are critical. Ongoing partnership with major institutions and increased support for small and mid-sized organizations that are hubs for community activity. We're also committed to supporting the individual artists who are essential to New York's creative vitality. Our grants for artists through local arts councils are at historic highs, 3 times what they were at the start of the de Blasio administration. We also remain committed to building affordable workspace for artists in partnership with our colleagues at New York City EDC. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight the important connections between the city's cultural, community, tourism, and the economy. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Is there anyone else testifying? All right, I think we reached our cruising altitude. You can see just by the testimony already how important this is to us as a council, as a city, and going forward. And we thank you for the testimony and the insight of an industry that maybe hasn't had the chance to really share that insight before. And that's why we thank the advocates for coming and the different reports that have been done and the ways the different boroughs are participating and not participating, and how we can grow New York City and company, and how EDC's role as a partner and leader in this. So there are so many council members on this committee, and it's always my custom to make sure the council members get a chance to speak first. Let me just make sure that we acknowledge that council members Levine, Lander, and Barron have joined us. And I think maybe a good way to start is just with EDC's vision of tourism in general. How do you see tourism as an economic generator for New York City?
Thank you for the question. We definitely agree that tourism is an important economic generator for the city. We think that tourism is an extremely strong industry right now, and we work.
Is it 3rd or 4th on the list for economic, I believe correctly?
I would have to defer to the president.
It is, depending on how it's measured, it's the 6th largest in the city. Is that
By
Donna?
jobs.
By jobs.
Sure.
Given the way we measure the economic impact, as we mentioned, $66 billion, we are in a city in which many industries, including the financial services and real estate sector, operate at a much higher level of per item and per project cost than what an individual visitor or a collection of visitors might spend. We have focused much of our monitoring in terms of size and relative growth, in terms of the size of the employment sector, and that growth and that wage structure. The majority of as President Dixon mentioned, the average wage earned in the industry is actually above the median household income for the city of New York. So these are overall very good jobs. Many of them are unionized, and they are located in all 5 boroughs, both in terms of direct employment and what we call indirect employment, the provision of additional services, wholesale inputs, as well as jobs at restaurants, museums, transportation centers, services, and so on, that are in all 5 boroughs.
Well, since you mentioned the jobs, are we up to speed with the jobs, the ladders for leaders and the other programs that the city's trying to generate so that we can have enough of our students coming into this field in this great opportunity that's right in front of them right here in New York City?
Absolutely, and we agree with you. We want to see all of those great jobs go to our best and brightest right here at home, instead of having to recruit from outside of New York City. And that's an area that we have invested in and that we're looking to do more in. But as the marketing organization, we really defer to our colleagues at EDC and other agencies in regards to workforce development specifically. But we have empowered internships, externships, and partnerships amongst our 2,000 member companies to take on students from Ladders for Leaders and from the CTE program as well. And we're looking to expand that even more. We just had our fundraiser last night for our foundation, which is a separate 501c3 that we run, and raising money. One of the things that we want to do in the future is we want to invest more in scholarships and in workforce development opportunities. So that is something that we look forward to talking more about.
Well, that relationship is something I think each of us would like to hear. So how does the relationship work between New York Company and EDC?
EDC. So as it relates to workforce development specifically?
In general.
Just in general, yeah. So we cooperate on a number of issues as they often manage the assets for things like the cruise terminals, for example. We work very closely in terms of promoting the cruise destination. New York has become one of the fastest growing cruise ports in the country, which took a lot of folks by surprise. Everyone thought, oh, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. But it is due to their investments and the attractiveness, I think, of the destination. And we cannot discredit the enormous number of people that live in our region. They're a prime target for a lot of these cruise lines.
Even use of the ferries. I mean, you can see the demand. Every council member is trying to expand the ferry system.
It's a great point.
We talked about making that its own agency. It's such a success at this point.
It is a huge success, and we encourage visitors to use it as well, more on off-peak times, because we know New Yorkers need those ferries to get to and from work, and so we're not encouraging them to use them in the morning and the evenings. But in between, when the ferries are less occupied, it's a great resource.
So the collaboration with EDC then through the expansion of something within the marketing program of using the ferries, of using the different destination points, how does that collaboration work?
Thank you for the question. We definitely spend a lot of time coordinating with Nycc and Company. Because the tourism industry is doing so well, we really look to them as a guide for trying to figure out some of the strategies on our assets. And we serve to kind of support what's going on in the assets, especially in the cruise terminals, as was mentioned, also in Pier 94, in Basketball City, in the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, where we just had Formula E, and also had mayors from different cities around the country coming to do Smart Cities Conference at Basketball City. And so we spend a lot of time talking with our colleagues at Nycc and Company and really look to them to help guide us with the data piece, the strategy piece, and we serve to support that with managing the assets.
So are we looking to grow the budget and the collaboration and the effort with New York City and Company? We feel that the amount of economic generator coming as part of this hearing is that we should be expanding the role of the budget and EDC over with tourism in general. We believe it's such a viable part of everything that's happening in the city. We want to see that grow. Is there any plans on growing the budget with New York Company?
We definitely agree with the question and with trying to grow tourism. The way that we do it at EDC in general is to invest in the infrastructure, in the transportation, in the funding agreements program that we have with Department of Cultural Affairs, and continue to make it a city that has an economy that is booming.
How do we track that? How do we know what's coming next? What's the line of infrastructure upgrades that are coming that are going to benefit our tourism industry?
Can you?
Well, if we're gonna participate in helping in the infrastructures and allow tourists and residents to get through to participate in the tourist industry, what is EDC's plan to better the infrastructure that is the entry point? Whether it's the Port Authority, whether it's the trains, whether it's the hubs.
So thanks for the question. We definitely have a lot of different plans across the entire city for all the infrastructure. And incidentally, that is very supportive of things like tourism. So as was mentioned before, we have leases with the Port Authority on the airports. And through that, we advocate to them for improvements in that transportation.
Is that working? Because I think one of the things that we all heard at the hearing, at the meeting, was the first impact people get when they get off a plane, when they get off a train, when they get off a cruise ship is not the best. You know, we want to make it just like when we go on vacation and we go someplace, the first thing you see should knock you off your feet, and that's not what's happening now. It's clearly not the first thing you see is knocking you off anyone's feet. This is a good example of the future, but we want to know what your plan and budget is to make that entry point something that a tourist and someone in the city would say, wow, I want to come back.
I think it's a good question, and we share the goal. I think we really have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So for example, in the cruise terminals, I think as a point of clarification, at least in Manhattan, we're finding that the surveys are very positive in terms of people coming into the cruise port. And that's a new thing. It's based on lots of effort that we have put forward there. I've been meeting with the cruise lines personally even today and getting rave reviews for how much improvement has been made. In the airports, as we said before, we agree with the Center for the Urban Future. The visitor experience starts as soon as someone comes into the airport, and we've been advocating, as I said in my testimony, for Next Gen Air, which is an FAA initiative, but truly our role is in advocating to the tenant who has control over that, which is the Port Authority. And with the ferries, I think our surveys indicate that it is one of the most beloved customer experiences that New Yorkers and tourists are having. So we're very proud of that. But I think it's useful to talk about each one because there's different levers, and that's why we look to an entity like NYC and Company to help us coordinate the oftentimes complicated experience of tourists coming in from very many different areas. And our role is to serve with them, and then also with cultural affairs in helping the real estate portion and the planning portion, which is more in our area of expertise, support the visions and the strategies that they have.
Well, I mean, you mentioned them as a role as a tenant with the Port Authority and the airports. I would think we'd have greater ability to just more than advocate to our tenants, since they are our tenants, to actually make the requests that the advocates are here today saying we need to do. I think there might be something else we can explore going forward as to not just being, we sit back and wait to see what the airports are going to do for their plan on what they're doing in LaGuardia and JFK, which Queens takes the brunt of. We'd like to have a greater say. And I think this is the type of forum exactly where we can, instead of telling folks who said, all right, it's out of our hands because it's FAA or it's state, no, they think this is the perfect way that we can get into the conversation as to what's happening in these airports, what's happening in the expansions, and what the role's going to be, the local impact, and how it's going to help tourism. We need to get back at that table.
I think we agree with that, and I did not mean to imply by any thing that I said that we were sitting back and doing nothing. We are very strongly advocating, and in some of that advocation, we have been able to get some changes to happen, and including support that has happened to the airports around Next Gen. With something like the cruise terminals, because we had the opportunity to redo those leases recently with all of your support, we were able to put in place new things that we did not, or our predecessors, I guess, had not thought of at the time as some of the goals were changing, and we'd certainly be happy to sit down and look at that for the airports with you.
I think that would be great. And my last question before I turn over to chairs for today is, when we're speaking to the advocates, one of the direct impacts to whether it's Midtown or the Alliance or Broadway Theater is the quality of life that is surrounding the areas that are generating economic growth. What is your role in helping coordinate the quality of life that's so dependent on the tourist experience in and around not only just Times Square, but for the rest of the city?
The question is, what is EDC's role in supporting quality of life around the city?
Are we coordinating with the NYPD? Are we expanding the amount of budget that we have for local security detail? What is the future for, we talked about at that meeting and for today, to even creating a dedicated budget just for a tourism type of officer that could be a visible help to not only tourists, but New York City too, as to where things are, where's the safest route, the most trusted forms of attractions that can be used. There needs to be a greater emphasis on helping the businesses that provide this economic impact and giving them the tools to be able to handle the daily quality of life issues that they encounter as well as we encounter as New York City.
So it's a good question. We agree it's important. I think there are some things I know that are occurring specifically in Times Square around that Tim has been involved with, I believe, but I think I'd like to turn the question to the president of NYC and Company to discuss it more specifically.
Thank you. It's a great question, and we agree with you. And we feel very strongly that the things that impact everyday New Yorkers' lives are the things that also impact visitors. That's the things they care about, things like infrastructure and transportation and quality of life issues. So as those improve, we see tourism improve. One of the greatest things that helped tourism grow over the last many years was that we have become such a safer city. And that has resonated. You see almost tracking together the lowering of the crime rate with the growth in tourism. So it goes to counter a lot of the public perception that comes from movies and television over the past. NYPD Blue wasn't necessarily our best friend in some of those situations. So there are a lot of engagement points there, and we advocate on behalf of our members with the city and with other organizations. You know, issues around ticket sellers on the street, for example. And other issues that, in terms of wayfinding, we agree. We think there's more opportunities there, and it's something we would be happy to explore more.
And to turn it over to our co-chair, Jimmy Van Bramer.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Great. So first of all, thank you all for being here and for your testimony. I do want to say, as the Chair of Cultural Affairs, it is absolutely wonderful to have a hearing like this that amplifies just how important we are to the City of New York, how important the Department of Cultural Affairs is to the City of New York, how important our cultural organizations and institutions are. When you look at the numbers on this market profile in terms of culture and the arts, it should be a signal to every policymaker, every thought leader in the City of New York that we should be increasing the level of support for culture and the arts. And I might add, Fred, we should be increasing support for your organization because they're wed and inextricably linked to the tune of billions of dollars. And we know that when culture and the arts are strong, people come, and New York City benefits. And not just a little bit, it's not just a great luxury to have, it's not just pretty pictures on a wall or great dancers on a stage, it's 30 million people coming to the City of New York almost exclusively for culture and the arts, and generating billions and billions in revenue, and making sure that tens of thousands of people have jobs. It is so incredibly important. It leads me to a question about your organization, Fred, though. Your budget is a little bit smaller than some other cities, no? And just as the Department of Cultural Affairs I'm sure would welcome another $200 million in funding for the arts. For the record, Paul just gave a thumbs up, so when we vote in June, it's done by acclamation. We'll tell the speaker later, right, that this happened and it's done. Fred, your budget. Talk to me about your budget vis-a-vis other cities, because you just said you're competing worldwide with other cities to bring folks here. We know what happens when you bring people here successfully. What does that mean? And then of your budget, your marketing budget, what does that look like? And shouldn't it be increased?
Well, thank you for the question. And we agree with the line of conversation, absolutely. We always would like to talk about additional resources. It is a competitive world. It's more competitive today than it's ever been before because other cities and localities are waking up to the reality that tourism is a strong engine for their communities. And so you see people beginning to invest more and more. And I believe as a private trade association, we have been able to manage the city funds effectively. So I am proud of that work there, and also proud of the fact that we've garnered more private support. So our membership is growing. We have more partners that are coming to the table to support our programs. And culture and arts are right at the forefront of that for a number of reasons. And to your point, culture and arts are a great way to get people to discover new neighborhoods. You know, there's two ways to get people to explore. One is, I think, food. Your stomach always leads you, but then also arts and culture. And we see that through great exhibitions, whether it's the Brooklyn Museum or the Queens Museum. Anytime there's a blockbuster exhibition of any kind, you see visitation grow. So in terms of the budget, we absolutely would welcome the conversation. Every destination is a little bit different. People often compare us to Las Vegas. But the devil is always in the details. Las Vegas also manages their convention center. So of their $200 million, a significant portion of that goes to funding and operating the building. So every locality is a little bit different in that way. And I'm really proud of the work that our team has done in amplifying the funding that we do have. And I'm sure we'll be able to have those conversations with everyone's support at the right moment to see what we can do for the future.
So we talked a little bit about infrastructure and its impact here. We also talk a lot about tourism going to boroughs other than Manhattan, as wonderful as Manhattan is. And this is a serious question. The 7 train in Queens is an impediment for a lot of people, right? If you follow social media at all, you know how difficult that train and other trains can be. And if the 7 train is the route to get to Flushing Meadows Corona Park, and the Queens Museum, and the Queens Theater, and the Queens Zoo, and so many of the other amazing institutions, does it concern either of you in particular, and EDC maybe more specifically, about, obviously it's the MTA and New York City Transit, but you've got to have a piece of this, right? And how do we talk about mass transit, the 7 train in particular, in this specific example, and how that impacts people's ability to get to and from those places that we all want people to go to. It's just as important for folks to see Flushing Town Hall and Papa News and all the way out in College Point, but they've got to be able to get there. And people talk and they look at social media all the time, and if all they're reading is the 7 train doesn't work, then they may forego the opportunity to see those neighborhoods and those cultural institutions.
Thank you, Council Member. We definitely agree in terms of trying to improve transportation across the entire city. We have also seen the issues with the 7 train, and we are at least excited about signal improvements that continue to progress. But also,
this is the first week that we've had CBTC, and it's been a disaster.
Well, we, as you pointed out, it is managed by the MTA, and we are dedicated at EDC to continuing to explore all transportation options. We think transportation is a critical part of economic development and, of course, of tourism as well.
It's just got to be all of our concern. So I wanted to ask a little bit about the legislation. Maybe Councilmember Powers is going to talk a little bit more in depth about it. But I read your concerns and saw your testimony, Fred, in particular, where you addressed it. But just as this hearing is amplifying the importance of tourism and in particular, from my perspective, cultural tourism, that gets us all to focus on it more, think about it more. The report obviously spurred all of this. The dashboard would seem to be a part of that continuum, right, of getting us to drill down even further, think about this, maybe inform public policy and funding. So talk a little bit about, maybe all of you, what you think the merits of the dashboard would be, and then maybe just a little bit, because I'm sure Councilmember Powers will talk more about this, but your concerns, Fred, about the inability to get the data. We have some experience in being able to get data like this, and there are a lot of willing partners in industries that I would think would want to provide some of this data. So a few questions in there, but maybe all of you could address those.
Sure, I'd be happy to go first, and thank you for the question. And I'll defer to my colleague Donna Karen, who's head of research. She's the expert, obviously, in this area. We agree with you, more research is always a good thing, and that's something that we are constantly looking at. As a private trade association, we do commission research, and Donna can go into more detail from a variety of sources. Oftentimes that is made available only by subscription, and those subscription terms don't allow us to share it. So we use it to guide our decision making and our strategies, but many of the sources we're unable to actually make those public because a lot of the data sources are private. We have had a challenge in getting information from the private industry in the past, and particularly the culturals. I mean, that's something that we can work on. in terms of sharing a lot of that data, because it is an important metric and it will guide us more. But I'm going to defer to Donna to say a little bit more about the dashboard and the realities behind how can we get to more data more regularly, and that is a challenge. We'd love to have more data on what's happening today.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely comment on our cultural visitor fact sheet. There is a great deal of work from our team and the vendors and suppliers that we work with. President Dixon emphasized in his remarks that much of the data we are able to share is only compiled on an annual basis. We use a number of proxy variables to take the temperature during the middle of the year. Hotel performance is provided to us on a weekly basis on a subscription that we purchase from a vendor named STR. We are, by the contract, not able to release that publicly. It's one of those conversations we have internally. We also rely very heavily on the very valuable data that the Broadway League, provides publicly every week. Again, given the percentage of visitors to Broadway, that's a very good barometer, let's call it, for what is happening in the city on a more timely manner. In order to know how many visitors, where they go, what they do, we are dependent upon purchasing nationally syndicated research studies, and the timing on that is basically it's annual. We will get the final results for 2018 sometime between March and June of 2019, at which point our team will sit and compile the report you're looking at and bring it together with our forecast modeling and a variety of other indicators. We, just as a shorthand list, U.S. Department of Commerce, National Travel and Tourism Office, DK Shiflett, Tourism Economics, Visa View Travel, Focusrite, Mandala Research, U.S. Travel Association, Destinations International, Travel Styles, EFG Consulting, the Commerce Board, and others. And that's just a sampling of data. Some of it comes in monthly, some of it comes in annually. And our job is to put it together in a profile that allows the industry to think about where they're going and what they need to be focused on, and to help us with our data-driven marketing strategy. As a data person, I would be ecstatic to put together a dashboard. As a practical researcher, I'm a little challenged to think where the data are going to come from, but I'm happy to continue the conversation.
We'll take that.
Just to follow on with the council member's question, as I think I've said numerous times, tourism is extremely important to us as an industry. We have a monthly economic snapshot that we produce. We have some researchers that look at about 27 different indicators that include jobs and industry indicators. But we then use publicly available data from the Broadway League and also from the Port Authority to report on some of this information. And I think it's pretty clear the expertise that NYC & Company has that we also rely heavily on. In terms of the legislation, we echo some of the concerns just about specifically tracking some of the economic transactions. If they are cash transactions, it's very hard to track what is occurring. And if they are credit card transactions, they're subject to privacy and disclosure agreements that make it more challenging. That said, we also would be very happy to sit down and discuss ways we can get around that or look at different data sources to get together.
Sounds remarkably positive, council members. So I just want to finish before we throw it to Councilmember Powers by saying, in particular when it comes to the cultural tourism piece here, you're trending remarkably in all the right directions, right? The city of New York and our cultural sector are producing, increasing, growing. True story, I got my shoes shined a couple of hours ago sitting right next to Henry Garrido, the leader of DC 37, and we just happened to talk about the increase in union employees at our culturals and libraries because we've been able to increase funding for the arts. And those jobs, of course, are all over the city. And we just need the tools to be able to continue to influence public policy and funding that keeps all of these bars going up and these incredible numbers. I just wish every single person in the city of New York knew these numbers when it comes to culture and the arts and tourism. If we did, we'd never have folks proposing to cut funding for culture and the arts in the city of New York. You'd never have that discussion because you'd know how devastating that would be to the city of New York. And I'm certainly committed to working with my colleagues to make sure that we do everything we can to continue to see these trends and do everything we can to make them a permanent part of the landscape in the city of New York.
Thank you, and that's exactly why this is our hearing. And this is not the last of these hearings. This is the first step because this is such an important, there's so many levels and topics here. I'll turn over to Councilmember Powers.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for answering those questions. And I'll follow up on the bill but in a second. But I want to just follow up on Councilmember Van Bremer's point, which is exactly why we're doing the hearing, which is what tools can we put into the toolbox to help us continue to grow? And I think that's my intention. I hear from Times Square Alliance, Broadway League, others about challenges within their area in Times Square, safety, security, things like that. But I think just more broadly, what are things that you're seeing other cities do that we could be doing here that you need help with the council or the mayor's office or otherwise to be able to expand your ability to do your job? And what are the things that you see as the stress points and challenges as we kind of move forward? Safe city being, I agree, one of the biggest ones. Economic growth, national, international, strength of dollar, and international. But what are the challenges, and also what are things that we can be helpful to in terms of your ability to do your job?
Thank you for the question. And that speaks to the heart of the issue, and we probably could be here 2 days, I think, in discussing all of those, because that's a very deep question. But in terms of stressors, you mentioned the biggest ones, and that is obviously the strength of the dollar. With 13 million international visitors coming to New York City, it's interesting to observe that they're 20% of the volume, but they're 50% of the spending, because they're staying here longer and they're spending more money and they're exploring more. It's probably not surprising to anyone that the Americans are the last ones to get on the subways. The international travelers are the ones that are the most explorative. They're the most intrepid ones, and they're the ones that are setting the trends. So you'll see us focus a lot on international because they just punch above their weight in so many ways and set trends for others to follow. So the dollar and the strength of it is probably our biggest threat at any given moment in terms of shifting the tides. There are a number of national policy concerns as well, and we do lobby with the U.S. Travel Association and others in Washington on things like the travel ban, which we are deeply opposed to. You should not be discriminating against any group of people, and we feel very strongly that New York City was built on access, and it is a global city, and it has to remain global. And so we are a firm advocate of open borders and welcome doors, or open doors and welcome borders. So we always advocate strongly on that behalf. So national policy and currency aside, the limitations on our growth locally, there is a lot of competition for time and wallet. We do see that from neighboring areas. Congestion is one of the biggest issues that we see. We don't count anyone that's coming from within 50 miles of New York City. The commuters, you're coming from Westchester to work, you don't get counted as a tourist. But if you spend the night, if you come on Valentine's, bring your partner and you spend the night, then we do get to count you. But otherwise, congestion is a major issue, and we find that we are competing in the region. One of the things that makes the tourism industry so resilient is because of our location, with this enormous population base in the Northeast that is around us. When the pocket is pinched, people may not go to Disney World, but you're going to bring your kids to see Disney on Broadway. That is an important thing that we have observed over the years, and it keeps us strong even in times of challenge. So congestion is a big issue. Access to the city is an issue. You see people clinch up when there's construction on the tunnels or the bridges. Those issues really can have an impact because there's so much opportunity in local communities now outside of the city and in the region where people can go to local museums because everyone is investing so heavily. So those kind of issues, ease of access is probably at the forefront of that. And then in other terms, we touched on quality of life issues. Safety is an enormous one. That has, I think, opened so much opportunity for us. People that are coming here see how welcoming and friendly our city is, and how open it is, and how exciting, and how it's always new. And those are tremendous opportunities for us. In terms of tourism, the first thing that we have to do is we have to get people to choose New York. You have to choose New York City versus other destinations, London, Paris, Orlando, St. Louis. You need to choose New York City first, and that's where we really spend a lot of our energy. And then once they're in the city, then we work on getting them around. Getting them to explore. Yes, they're going to go to Times Square the first time. There's not much we can do about that. That's a good thing, I think, in many ways, because it is such an iconic attraction. But once they're there, then we really work strongly on encouraging distribution through space and through time. So we try to shift demand into winter when things are slower, when the trains are less congested, when the shops are less full. So you will see us spend a lot of energies there in terms of shifting people into the winter. One of the realities is that much of the year our hotels are running at 95+% occupancy. We are the envy of almost every city in America when it comes to our hotel occupancy. So literally there are moments when we can't get more people into the city. That has been addressed by the incredible growth in the hotel industry. But you'll see, because of the popularity of New York, that those hotels are full as soon as they open. So in terms of demand, we've been selling 1.5 million to 2.5 million more room nights every year. And so our occupancy rate has remained very strong. The hotels have been challenged on rate because there's so much more competition. And so there's been a downward pressure on their returns. But in terms of volume of people coming and staying in hotels, we've been able to fill all those available hotels. So capacity is a real issue. Capacity in infrastructure, in transit, and also in hotels, and the ability to continue to grow.
And from proactive strategies that we can do, in addition to like the sort of baseline things like safety, keeping economic growth, things like that, are there other things in addition to the bill we're doing, which is to sort of highlight important parts and important data? Is there things, we have New York City ID, which tries to get people, not tourists, but really, but like there are things that try to help people go visit cultural institutions. Are there other things we could be doing that would help drive people here for the first, second, third time, not from New York City, to make their experience more accommodating? Are there things that we can do to, I assume funding is a big part of it too. And my second question to that would be, if given more funding, can you tell us how you would be using it in terms of, and what expected return would be in terms of
It's difficult to gauge in advance, but knowing what the opportunities were, we could be more precise in the future with you. I think one of the greatest opportunities is arts and culture. I think the more we can promote arts and culture, the more programming that DCLA is able to encourage, the more we're able to use that to drive visitation, especially into the neighborhoods. That is one of the ways I think that we're going to be able to make sure that everyone benefits from the rising tide of tourism, is getting people out more. And we've been promoting we've had a 5-borough strategy for as long as I've been in the NYC company. I've been there since 2005. But every year the product grows, and so as more cultural institutions open, as they learn more about tourism, our Tourism Ready program, I think, is one of the things I'm most proud of, because it is showing culturals and small businesses the opportunities in tourism, and to how to put on exhibitions and to promote them properly, and how that will drive business. And then it will fill the shops nearby. People have to eat lunch, they want to shop. So we look forward to working with you on more opportunities in terms of that. And funding would definitely be a part of that equation. But one of the areas I'd like to just put a little bit of focus on is groups and conventions. That is an area where we are really challenged compared to other destinations in terms of available space. The Javits Center, by all comparisons, is the busiest convention center in America in terms of event days. It's so popular, and it's full. It has the highest occupancy rate of any building in the country. So we have, this is where we work closely with EDC on things like Pier 94 and other locations to put groups into unexpected spaces, getting them out into the boroughs, into buildings that are able to occupy conventions and meetings and trade shows and special events. But there is a real opportunity there, and I'm glad that it was mentioned in the CUF report, and I think it is something that we should be exploring as a city. How do we build new facilities to draw people to new neighborhoods and accommodate more groups? Because groups are an important component of the business. Last year, Donna, I think 6.5 million people came here for a meeting or a convention or a trade show. And there is so much opportunity there. And the nice intersection, and this is where EDC has been really helpful with us, is the intersection of different sectors. So with tech, we've been working closely with them on attracting some, especially tech conferences, where they spend a lot of money. It's high profile, a lot of great press for New York, and it feeds the local tech economy. And so they've been great and very supportive of us there.
Thank you. I'm going to leave my question to that because I know my colleagues want to ask them, and I'll stick around. On the bill, we'd be happy to work with all of you to figure out what the metrics we can report, how to collect it, how to make sure that we can highlight the work that you're doing, and do we use information that's publicly available. So we'll set a time to all talk about it, and I understand the challenges. So thank you. Thank you. And I want to say thank you again for doing this hearing.
Thank you, Councilman Barrett. So the council members are lined up for questions are Donovan Richards, then Carlos Menchaca, then Inez Barrett. So Donovan.
Thank you so much. Okay, got it. Thank you, chairs, and congratulations on a great hearing. First off, let me congratulate Nycc Company and EDC on phenomenal work. When you look at these numbers, it's just astounding at how much revenue New York City is generating because of culture and arts. I do want to move this towards a equity lens a little bit, and I'm certainly interested in hearing how are we really reaching local communities, specifically, I guess, for Adrian and I, who represent Southeast Queens, and I represent the Rockaways. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about what has your strategy been to ensure restaurants on the outskirts of the airports. Rockaway Beach, obviously, I think we saw about 8 million visitors last summer. But one of the challenges has always been, from an equity lens, how do we ensure that there's a plan in place that ensures the entire Rockaways is part of cultural and arts plan. So can you just speak to a little bit more of, are you looking at this from an equity lens? A lot of money here, a lot of jobs. Can you speak to how this is reaching low-income communities? Is that something that Nycc Company and EDC is focused on?
Sure, thank you for the question. And it's an area we think about a lot because it's really important to us. I mean, I think, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and Donna can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the tourism industry is one of the industries that offers the most opportunity for everyone. There are opportunities whether you're college educated or you're not. I grew up in the tourism industry, my family is in it, and I know that it has been a real impact in the community in terms of folks who, no matter what their education or background is. Especially for immigrant communities, is often one of the first ways up in the workforce is in hospitality and tourism, hotel jobs, restaurant jobs. They're vital in that sense, and we agree with you. The more we can grow the pie, the more opportunities there are for everyone. And as it relates to the neighborhoods in particular, in the Rockaways, I mean, the ferry has changed that scenario significantly. And again, we try to encourage...
Somewhat.
Okay, as far as tourist access, I guess I should say, it's made it even more attractive. And again, we try to encourage tourists to not go during peak times. Let the locals have the...
We want them to come during peak times too, so don't do that for us.
Okay.
We'll take everything we can get.
I got you, all right, very good, fair enough. But for us, I mean, we use things, communities like the Rockaways as a great example to give press on New York around the world. One of the things that's really interesting and is always fascinating for people and journalists, in particular visiting journalists, is how popular the Rockaways is for surfers. And so one of the things we have to do, you know, there are certain communities that will come long distances, like the Australians, for example. All of our research show that the Australians, believe it or not, love to come and surf in the Rockaways because the surfing is so amazing, and it is a bucket list dream item for them to be able to say that they've done it, take their surfboard on the train or on the ferry. And we take advantage of all those opportunities to get exposure for the community. We have to get folks there first. Once we get them there, and we get Rockaway known in their mind, and then it's on their list, and we get them to New York, and we get them out there, then we have to make sure that the community's ready to receive them. And that's where the Tourism Ready program comes in terms of how to work. So
I hear you. Can you speak to how do you link, so friends from Australia, is there a specific plan that draws them to all parts of the Rockaways? So that's what I'm looking to hear a little bit more about. So there are restaurants, obviously other opportunities. Has your organization thought about how we can tie all of these things together?
We, through our content, and I'd be happy to share more with you on the content that we have on our website and through all of our digital channels and promotion. Some of that is information that we create, so we're able to curate and promote those specific businesses, and then we bring journalists from around the world and influencers to come and experience it for themselves. And we want everyone to put their own lens on it, because that's where you're going to get the most exposure. I think we have more opportunity there, and I'd love to work with you and talk to you more about how we could do that. I'd love to hear any new ideas you have. about promoting local businesses even further. It is a lot about itinerary development and curation for us, and so the more content we have exposure on over 71 different neighborhoods currently through our programs across the 5 boroughs. The Rockaways certainly are one of the hottest ones today in terms of interest, and so we would be open to talking with you more.
All right, and so for Adrian and I, who share TWA Hotel, we're very happy that and got to see the tour. It's going to be a big job generator. I do want to move from within the airport to the outskirts of the airport a little bit. How do you work? And this is a question for EDC. How do you work with city planning? Is there any strategy around ensuring that we create development opportunities on the outskirts for local communities? So for instance, on the outskirts of the airport, there's a lot of land, some of it EDC owned. I know Bartlett is coming in, which is gonna be a big job generator for us. But I'm interested in hearing what is the strategy around luring people to stay in local communities on the outskirts from a commercial, entertainment standpoint, destination retail, and also commercial building space. You know, I think these are all strategies we have to look at if we're, you know, as we move and then this industry grows, how do we ensure not just the Rockaways, but the communities in Southeast Queens also on the outskirts of the airport benefit from the industry. So what's your strategy working with city planning?
Let me just say.
And I'm gonna, I know, I could go in all day.
We have
Yeah,
quite
I know,
a few
but
panels.
yeah, I know. I got one last question after this, and then I'm done.
Yeah, I'll try to keep.
And if they can keep the answers short and concise, we can.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Urge me along. So we definitely agree that access is really important across the 5 boroughs. With city planning, we do spend a lot of time looking for opportunities for development, specifically in areas like you're talking about. Although I'm not personally on that team, I'm happy to connect you with folks that are to talk about it. And we have a very strong outer borough strategy. I think that's been going on for quite some time in terms of destination retail. Although I know it's not in your district, we're very proud of Empire Outlets and City Point really driving a lot of that and the job growth. And as I'm sure you all know, we pioneered the Hire Nycc program back in 2008. We started it at EDC to ensure that New Yorkers got first looks at jobs, and really that has expanded to other agencies in 2015 and is a very strong way of ensuring that at least there are opportunities connected to all of these projects, whether they are projects that we do with NYC and Company or Cultural Affairs. So we're really proud of that and our MWE program where we think we'll hit the numbers. And in addition, for outer borough strategies, we're working very closely with Department of Cultural Affairs around the Affordable Real Estate for Artists program, which really is looking at targeted areas that could use the benefit that we discussed earlier of how culture is really raising those places as a destination and equity.
All right, in light of Paul telling me I'm too long-winded, I'm gonna begin to wrap up. But I do want to say that I am certainly interested in hearing a little bit more about how we're reaching, like I said, low-income communities with these jobs, the CTE programming for sure. There's no programming in Southeast Queens or the Rockaways surrounding that. I'll also point out that I have not seen much of a marketing strategy for the cultural centers that are in Southeast Queens. So we have the Black Spectrum Theater, we have JCAL, we have York College Performing Arts Center. How are you tying in people getting off the planes at JFK and staying at airports surrounding the airport to ensure that they're aware of the opportunities of culture in our communities? The last question is, that wasn't a question, but the last question is, so I remember under the prior administration, the JFK airport lease being up in 2005. When is that up again? Will that provide an opportunity for more negotiations? And then lastly, have you thought about ferry service from JFK into the Rockaways? And I know that was something on the mind of the prior administration, and I think that that's a great way to draw tourism into the Rockaways as well. So Those are my last two questions. I look forward to a continued conversation on the equity piece around tourism. These jobs have to come to local communities, and if I were a betting person right now, they're not. So I look forward to more conversation around it.
We definitely look forward to working with you on that as well. I'm going to have to get back to you on exactly when the JFK lease turns over, but we're certainly happy to follow up on that. And was there one other?
Ferry service.
Oh, ferry
Yeah, I got
service.
another
Yes,
question.
we
Ferry
hear
service
you
to the
about
rock.
ferry service.
Yeah.
There's a study underway, and we have heard lots of requests for ferry service, and the mayor will respond to those requests.
And now, Councilmember Nycc.
Thank you. Thank you to the chairs. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to go right into it. What neighborhoods are seeing a greatest growth of tourism in the tourism industry outside of Manhattan, and how do you measure that?
That's a great question. Thank you, council member. I'm going to defer to my colleague, Donna Karen, to answer that.
Councilman, thank you for the question. That is one of the challenges that we face in understanding where people go and the data. The investment in the hotel sector has been a good, again, proxy indicator of where there are opportunities in the neighborhoods. Hotel growth in Brooklyn and Queens, both at and around the airports, as well as in other neighborhoods. We're also seeing that development happen in neighborhoods in the Bronx, Staten Island, parts of Brooklyn. The ferry service is a part that we would love to better understand. Who is riding on that ferry? Absent standing on every ferry, going back and forth and asking people, "Are you a visitor and where are you from?" Right.
Great jobs program, by the way.
Yeah.
I got some youth that will do that.
It's the downside of the 24/7 public transport system we have. It's around the clock. We are very interested in understanding that. We're looking at a variety of measures and ideas on where people actually are going. But it is a huge challenge for us.
Well, and I think that this is really critical when we think about funding, and a lot of the there's a lot of premise here that is missing this pillar of information. So I'm really hoping that we can get some commitment that we're going to figure that out. And I don't think that's all I'll say right now. Let's figure that out, because I think there's going to be a lot of requests from Jimmy Van Bramer on money for tourism, and Chair Valone, but we need to figure this out. And on the second side to that, I'm kind of curious about the impacts that it has on neighborhoods, and how you're measuring the impact of tourism on neighborhoods itself. And so while you might not know who's going where, you do know that there are tourist related industries popping up in different neighborhoods outside of Manhattan who might not have, don't have the DNA of a Manhattan neighborhood, but are impacted as well. How are you measuring that?
Our annual economic impact study does look at spending across all 5 boroughs and in the job category. We work with a company called Tourism Economics that starts with our visitor data, combines it with economic impact model, tax data from the state and the city, to look at that, to get down to the street level, as it were. I would actually refer to my colleague, who's probably still sitting behind me, Jonathan Bowles, because they have done some truly extraordinary work on how different industries play out through the city and the neighborhood development.
Got it, and I think he's going to be testifying later. So what I'm kind of curious about is gentrification and the acceleration of gentrification as it relates to tourism. And if anyone wants to comment on that, that'd be great. But I want to go, if anybody wants to touch that.
Again, to our role, as we've been discussing at Nycc Company, it's primarily marketing, inspiring visitation, informing people about the city in its entirety across the 5 boroughs and the neighborhoods. the more localized cycle of development, perhaps can refer to my colleague from EDC.
Well, I'm going to leave you to chew on that, but what I'm going to say is let's bring you to Red Hook. The cruise ship terminal is $58 million for the whole package of cruise ship and other amenities. How are you measuring the impact of the cruise ship terminal on the local Red Hook economy? Maybe this is for EDC. How are you measuring the impact for the local Red Hook economy, or the Red Hook cruise ship terminal?
Thanks for the question. I think that we are very intent and always trying to make sure that all of our projects have a positive impact on the local economy. To the points that maybe have been raised, there are different sources of the information to try to understand what is going on. We have our overall economic snapshot in terms of industry that I was referring to earlier that has the 27 indicators. For the tourism piece, we really look to our partners here at Nycc and Company. We also follow the reports of the Furman Center and try to understand what impacts there are on the different affordability of housing, and really also look to our partners at HPD around that. And then, as you know, we have a pretty developed program for trying to create affordable manufacturing and industrial space.
So what I'm hearing is intention, but no answers about the actual impact that a Red Hook local economy is having on the cruise ship terminal. Is that correct?
I do not have any answers for you right now, but I'm happy to talk to my colleagues in the economic department and see if we can get you something more specific.
Okay, that'd be great. Because I think a lot of what we're talking about here looks at bigger numbers, it's kind of citywide numbers, and our local neighborhoods that we represent need to feel that, and Red Hook is not feeling the impact of the cruise ship terminal, and hundreds of millions of dollars are continue to go into the cruise ship terminal, and I just haven't seen that. And I will note that the synergy between the cruise ship terminal, you can see the lack of understanding here from the larger conversations. There's no Wi-Fi at the cruise ship terminal, so folks can't get on, international folks can't get onto their phone and then find a nice little local restaurant. And the wayfinding to get to the ferry in Red Hook is I love the ferry, I do, but you can't get to it if you don't know that it's there already. The Port Authority entrance at Pioneer and Conover, you think it's closed. And so much of what we can do is very kind of localized, but the eyes are on the big numbers. The eyes are on the kind of average 67,000 Empire stores wages, when I want to know the median of those wages for those stores. So this is the kind of refocus that I think I'd like to see. And as a member of this committee, I want to work with the chair to figure out how we can reposition all three of you to look at local neighborhoods and their actual impact, and have an answer to us about how you're measuring that impact.
If I can add one more thing, Council Member, I've worked diligently while you're speaking, and one of my colleagues told me that we actually have a study specifically for Red Hook on the impact of local businesses, and we'd be happy to share that with you.
It's done.
It's done. And then in addition, we have...
Released?
I don't know the answer to that, but in a couple minutes I might. But also, in addition, I think you know this, but we are upgrading BCT now, Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, and are looking at some of the things that you described, certainly in terms of Wi-Fi and wayfinding and things that you've mentioned before, and shore power actually, and we're very concerned about them, and would be happy to follow up with you personally about that.
And we've been lucky because the clock has not been working, but let's get the clock working, and we're up to Councilmember Brown.
I've been lucky. You certainly have been lucky.
So now the clock starts.
Go for it.
I want to thank the chairs for the hearing and thank the panel for coming. My questions are similar to those raised by my colleagues, Council Members Richards and Menchaca. These numbers are great, they're fantastic, and I want to understand how they can support and help my community and communities of color. So you talked about, your testimony said that there were 392,000 jobs. It's the sixth largest employment sector. I want to understand how your partnership with the DOE and DYCD has generated specific numbers of young people coming into that industry. And since I'm on the clock, I'm going to give you all my questions and then you can answer them. We talked about CIG and the number of cultural institutions that are part of that. I know initially, one of my colleagues talked about NYCID. Initially, when that came online, there was the ability for those who had the card to have reduced or free access to a number of those institutions. I'd like to know, has that been maintained, and how can we expand it? We're talking about people who are coming to New York City. We can't overlook those everyday New Yorkers, one of you mentioned, who already live here, and we can't deny them, or rather we should expand the opportunity for them to be able to take advantage of living here in the greatest cultural center in the world and be able to get the benefit of being here at a reduced cost. And I had another question, particularly about, following up, I think, on Menchaca's question about the job titles in this industry. And I would like to be able to get the job titles disaggregated by ethnicity so that I would know where people are in that spectrum of jobs, going as high as, I think you said the average was 71,000. That's the average, but I'd like to get a printout or data showing me exactly what the job titles are, what the range is, and how New York City people coming through the high school, the DOE programs are slotted into those positions. And in your partnerships, do you have internships for young people to be able to take advantage of that, to be able to get a feel of what those industries are, particularly through those CTE schools, to be able to get a foothold and get a leg up into getting into that? And I still have 17 seconds.
Well, thank you, Council Member, for that question. I'll start off, and my colleagues may have other things that they want to add, and certainly my colleague Donna from a research perspective. Where we come in at NYC Company is really identifying opportunities in the employment sector and in the private sector. So while the programs are managed by the Department of Education, we work to create opportunities for them to place students in. And so we go to our members, we go to the hotel community, and we ask for these internships every summer. And I'm proud to say that every year we've been increasing them. We're getting better response all the time because the hoteliers in particular are raising their hand, and they're saying we need workers, and we're looking to hire locally. And so we're helping DOE place students into those programs. So we are not able to actually select the students, but we're on the other end of the pipeline and providing those opportunities. And we're going to work to provide more. And I agree with you, it is definitely an equity conversation, and it is important to us that we raise all New Yorkers. So it is something that we have taken very seriously and something that we are working on. Through a lot of our initiatives, we are working on supporting small businesses. We feel strongly that New York City is not New York City without small businesses. If we become homogenized or gentrified to a point where you get the same offerings here you get in Atlanta or in Paris or in Los Angeles, then what's the point of traveling here? So a lot of our efforts, and you will see from a data perspective, are focusing on travelers who appreciate the local, who appreciate local unique experiences. So we look for a variety of patterns of behavior in our geo-targeting in terms of how we're identifying potential travelers here. And we want folks who appreciate local, who want to shop local, who want to support local businesses, because we're not going to be the same city if those folks go out of business. So those are a few areas that we focus on. And one of the things that that we're encouraging others to take up, we feel very strongly that there is a need for a new certification program for any young person who is not college bound, to be able to have a certification in hospitality, whether it's a 6-month program or a 9-month program. We've mentioned it to CUNY, we've mentioned it to a few other institutions, that there is a real need there for some basic certification training to then enter the workforce if you don't have a college education. Because once you're in hospitality, there are tremendous opportunities for you to grow and go up. Companies like Marriott and others have amazing management training programs that you see. It is not uncommon to see someone begin as a doorman or housekeeper and quickly move up into management, into that middle class lifestyle. So that is something that we feel very passionately about, and we're doing all we can to encourage it.
Do you have the numbers of how many students came through the internship program and were placed? You could get that. If you don't have it, you could get it. And some response to the CIG involvement with NYC ID program.
Yeah, and I would just, the first question quickly, my colleague handed me a sheet of paper from the Department of Education. In Culinary, Hospitality, and Tourism CTE portfolio, there were 22 programs in 20 different schools serving 3,000 students. And we would have to defer you to DOE, I think, for more information on that.
With respect to the IDNYC, we've been working closely with our colleagues throughout city government to support the cultural sector and then integrate them into public services. So there's actually two examples that I think I would like to share, which one is IDNYC, and that is still going on, and it has provided more than 630,000 free cultural memberships to New Yorkers. The other one I wanted to highlight is Culture Pass, which we worked with NYC and Company on to advertise the program on linked NYC kiosks and bus shelters. And that's a partnership with the city library systems and supported by DCLA. And that's welcomed over 90,000 since it launched in the summer. And they're open to doors to cultural institutions in all 5 boroughs.
And I think you said there are 35 members in the CIG. How many of those 35 institutions are participating in NYCID?
So there's 33 CIGs, and I would have to get back to you on the number that are the specific number, but I'm happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Rivera?
I just want to say briefly, Councilmember Barron, though you're the first to have the time, it broke and stopped. So it's the longest 10 seconds in the history of the world. Just had to point that out. And as I point that out, I just want to say, because we haven't done it yet, we should thank all the sergeants at arms and all the members of the staff and the speaker's office who, when we have these off-site hearings, do a lot of work to put it together and make sure that the council members have as good a time as possible. So thank you to all of you for doing the work.
Well, I only have one question, so I could probably use the time that Jimmy just used and like still make it under the mark. So certainly you market nightlife as being a very important part of tourism. So whether it's the mega clubs and meat packing or the warehouse parties in Brooklyn or trendy bars in the Lower East Side and East Village, this is certainly something people do. You mentioned in your testimony that people book hotels and they book reservations, right? So restaurants and bars and nightclubs. I'm curious as to, I was just at the last of the nightlife tour, Office of Nightlife, newly created. And of course, the main concern is quality of life and the people that actually live in these neighborhoods. People live in Chelsea, people live in Bushwick. Are you working with the new Office of Nightlife and fully realizing that they are new, to kind of address, to take those issues into consideration and how you market to people who don't maybe know the rules or the cultural etiquette of New York City?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember, and that is a great question. It is something that we have begun dialogue on. I don't have any further information at this moment, but it is something that we can expedite and speed up in terms of how we're working closely with the nightlife. They are new, and they're getting up to speed on a number of issues. And I think tourism hasn't had a full in-depth conversation yet, but that is something that we can make happen sooner than later. And it is something that we do take seriously. And it is important. We see it in other destinations around the world, how visitors are impacting local communities by misbehaving. And that is not something we want to happen here. And so that etiquette and respect of culture is an important one, and it's something that we will take to heart.
Right, so because we're a city that's very much associated with service, and so that is certainly involved in your marketing campaign. So I would encourage that. It's really important. I know in my district, people are always contacting us about sleeping and their street, not being able to sleep, and the sidewalks are crowded, and I want people to come and visit the Lower East Side of the city. I always get a little bit jealous of tourists to see like New York City for the first time since I was born and raised here. It seems magical. So I think that's just a really, really important piece because we are open until 4 a.m., more or less. So thank you.
Councilmember, and before the panels, there's 2 panels, and we have 2 council members. We're getting to you. It's just a few more minutes, and then we'll start the first panel, and then we have a second panel. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you very much, co-chairs, for this very enlightening discussion today and hearing, and thank you to all of the panelists for your patience and your testimony today. We really do appreciate it. This, for me, has been extremely eye-opening. As Councilmember Richards said, we have been primarily focused with JFK redevelopment, all of those things that process has entailed, and just to be here in the site, in the setting today is just, again, breathtaking and taking my breath away. The view is spectacular. Just to echo a couple of points in the interest of time that Councilmember Richards pressed on. In Southeast Queens, and taking a look at the equity issue specifically in Southeast Queens, we have a lot of things to offer tourists, and we have not seen the benefits. So I am agreeing with Councilmember Richards and Barron in that the numbers are spectacular when it comes to New York City tourism. We have to figure out a way so that there is equity in this process and equity for all of the communities in the city of New York. When I take a look at my area, Jamaica Performing Arts Center, Black Spectrum Theater, York College Performing Arts Center, these are places that draw people into these areas and these beautiful locations and have beautiful work done, from arts displays to musical concerts, etc. You name it, and these institutions have them. I really would like to know what the plan is, if there is a plan to draw tourism into Southeast Queens, into some of these areas that have been neglected. Is there a plan? If not, when will the plan be planned? How can we do to help you plan? And when can we all get together to plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. I'll be happy to take that one. It is a great question, and I agree with you. There is tremendous opportunity, particularly those institutions that you mentioned, and I jotted them down, and I will follow up with our team on those. We have a tourism ready committee based in Queens, and we have talked about creating one in the Jamaica area. We have not done that yet. We may need your help in identifying businesses in the community that want to raise their hand. We oftentimes go out with open solicitation for engagement because it's a free program, and sometimes people just glaze over on it. They don't perhaps realize what it is, or so we may have an opportunity with your office to actually penetrate more deeply. Because once we get folks in and they actually understand the Tourism Ready program and how it works and the opportunities that are there, I think there's really unlimited potential, especially as it relates. One of the things that we didn't talk about today, but is a term that we use in tourism called VFR, and VFR is visiting friends and relatives, and it is an enormously powerful part of the tourism economy because we have people here from all over the world, and their family and friends come to visit them because why not? It's New York. I want to sleep on your couch. I want to go explore your community, and I want to see the Rockettes or the tree or whatever it is. So that is an area where we have a lot of opportunity, especially in neighborhoods outside of Manhattan. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to jump in because of time. So you stated in the testimony that many industries are doing well as a result of culture and tourism, like our hotels, our restaurants, and many others. Has there been a thought given to the fact that you mentioned that our hotels are booming and they're doing very well, and many other cities wish they had the type of occupancy? In many other cities, and I'm sure you're aware, in San Francisco, in Houston, and many others, they have a hotel tax. And that hotel tax is utilized in order to support arts and cultural programming. San Francisco, I believe, was the first to kick it off in the 1960s, and they've utilized that as a way to further support arts and cultural programming. Has there been, I know in my previous life, there was a push where we started the process of looking at a hotel tax in order to provide greater support for the arts. Because if all these industries are going to be doing so well and benefiting from arts and culture, they should contribute to a cycle of making sure that it's successful.
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. Donna, would you like to take this question? Yes, on taxes.
Okay. Councilmember, thank you for the question. All of the taxes currently paid by visitors in hotels goes directly into the city's general fund. It is there to be allocated. Currently, a visitor to New York City pays 5.875% hotel room occupancy tax on their hotel room rate. They also pay the city and state sales tax. They also pay $2 per room per night to a city fee also collected. Currently, the combined city sales tax and hotel taxes generate about $1 billion a year from the hotel sector that is in the general fund. New York City does have the highest rate of hotel tax charges on any consumer's bill, and with also the highest room rate. we are taxing our visitors at an extraordinarily high level, and they are aware of it. As President Dixon mentioned, we have an international market that's extremely important, but they are also feeling the pressure on their currencies of the strong dollar.
But that money that's being, the taxes that are coming in are not specifically designated towards the arts. You're saying it just goes towards a general.
It is in the general fund, and it is then up to the council, given your relationship with the design of the budget, to allocate that money. As the industry as a whole contributes almost $4.5 billion a year to the general fund through sales taxes, personal income taxes, corporate taxes, property taxes, all generated from that $66 billion economic impact.
So we've got to figure out a way to bring those resources back into our cultural institutions. And I just want to close with one. Prior to running for office, I had started an initiative when I was the director of the Mokata Museum called the Soul of Brooklyn. And the Soul of Brooklyn was created because for me as an African-American woman, wherever I travel, anywhere in the world, I always want to see Black culture. So if I'm going to London, I want to go to Brixton. If I'm going to Puerto Rico, like we just did, I want to go to Louisa. I want to see where people of color are living, but it's often something that I have to research and figure out myself. So I think it would be very advantageous to be able to create a mechanism for people that are coming to the city that are like, I'm Dominican and all I want to see is where Dominicans are in the 5 boroughs and I want to experience that. I'm African American, I want to see where our theaters, our libraries, our cultural institutions, our art spaces. It would be advantageous to create a mechanism so that people could find themselves, particularly in a city like New York. And often when we think about the outer boroughs, we're thinking about the larger institutions. And just by getting to the larger institutions makes individuals feel like we're reaching the outer boroughs. But it has to go much deeper than our major large-scale institutions. I don't necessarily want to go to a major institution when I travel. I want to see the little cultural institution that speaks to my history and my culture and my identity. So the Soul of Brooklyn is still in existence. It's a smaller version of what I would like to see for the city, but it's certainly something that I think would be advantageous because when you go into a hotel, you see the magazines that promote the larger institutions, the bigger restaurants. When you're in the airport and you're reading the magazine on the plane, it's about the bigger institutions and the bigger restaurants. Everything is big, but people really want to have that intimate experience, and it's critical that we do that. And I know that these ideas are not innovative that we're coming up with. These are things that in this new 2018 of diversity, things that should be already at this time. So I hope when we come back for our next panel discussion like this, maybe on a higher floor somewhere in here, that we're able to really celebrate some of the developments and the growth that you've made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. That is a great question, and I love that you brought that up because that is a powerful force in travel and tourism. People want to see others like themselves, and that self-identification is really important. And we have that in abundance in New York. And so we actually have identified several opportunities in the Hispanic community and the African American community in particular that we would like to explore with some new funding. I'll be quite honest with you. I mean, those are areas that we would be able to tap into if we had more resources. We recently took on more Hispanic language promotion in the press world to expand our messaging more and more into the Hispanic press in America. Because we didn't really have that ability before. That's one of the things we've been able to do out of our existing budget, but there are lots of opportunities. And we've even proposed and we've begun some planning on some real cultural specific communities and creating, just to your point, opportunities for smaller businesses and smaller institutions, because that's what people want today. I mean, it's not only smart from a community standpoint, it's smart from a marketing standpoint, because that is what people are looking for when they travel. Yes, they go to the big institutions. New York has a high repeat visitation rate. People come back here time and time again, and they want to go into the communities. We've seen a lot of success in this area in food tours. And then that is a small business area that is exploding right now, and it's easy for someone to get into that business, learn how to conduct tours, and then take people into the communities to explore the different cuisines. And I think that we can just take that even further. And to your point, I'm going to look into Soul of Brooklyn. I love that.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Before we let the panel go, I just want to personally thank you all for staying for the over 2 hours of questions from, we do have one of the largest committees in City Council just for this reason. And one of the future bills we're hoping to bring forward is possibly the creation of a tourism agency because of all of this. And maybe the council can then directly help with funding and priorities that way. So we're very excited to see the growth of this. And this is the first step of many. So with that, we thank you. And we're going to call up our first panel. The panel of 4 will be Jonathan Bowles for the Center for Urban Future, Tim Tompkins from the Times Square Alliance, Melissa Diaz from the American Museum of Natural History, and Charlotte St. Martin from the Port Authority. Thank you. Doing good? And there's some water on the sides if anybody would like. Thank you for your patience. It's only 15 council members.
Remind me. Yeah. Oh, do it when I get back. I'm not going back to my desk like your sister. Yeah,
well, we're not finished yet. We're not finished yet.
Quiet, please. We're recording off the air. Please keep it down. Take your conversations outside.
All right, John. The floor is yours, my friend.
All right. Should I go?
Yes, you're
all right. Well, good afternoon, and thanks so much for this amazing location and for bringing us all here. I want to thank you not only for the chance to testify, but also for your leadership on this issue. Just absolutely love the op-ed that you guys authored today. And I wanted to really echo my support for the bill that's introduced around the tourism dashboard. I'm Jonathan Bowles. I am the executive director of the Center for an Urban Future. We publish studies on a range of things affecting economic opportunity and economic development in New York City. We're not a tourism advocate, but we come at this looking at what's important for New York City's economy. And earlier this year, in partnership with Times Square Alliance and ABNY, we published our first ever report looking at the economic impact of the tourism industry. We know that tourism was important. I think what we didn't expect was just how much more important it has become over the last couple of decades. Everybody kind of knows and they see tourists around. I see several buses of them on Wall Street every single day where my office is. But I think that what we've tried to measure was what's been the impact to New York City's economy as the number of tourists each year climbed from about 33 million 20 years ago to 62 or 63 million last year. And what we found is that the impact has been enormous. Hundreds of thousands of jobs have been created, and tourism went from what was a pretty important industry to one of the 4 leading industries in New York City. And I'm going to skip around and I'm not going to talk about all the data. You can find it in the report, but I will highlight a few things. One is, and a couple people mentioned it earlier, that tourism is so important for lots of other industries, and that's one of the reasons why I think the dashboard is so important. Because sometimes you look at tourism and you just think, oh, that's just hotels. And you look at the hotel jobs and there's only so many of them. But what we found was that 24% of all credit card sales at restaurants come from tourists. And restaurants added 142,000 jobs over the last 15 years or so. Tourists account for 18% of all Visa transactions at retail stores in the city. Not only is that important because retail created a lot of jobs over the last 15, 20 years, but think about the challenges facing retail today. With tourists helping out, some of our great retailers are able to get that extra kick from tourism, and that's really important. And it's not just in Manhattan, and we show that in the report. We also, I'm not going to go into the great numbers. You already cited some of the numbers around tourism, but there's actually been jobs created, lots of them at museums and cultural institutions around the city, and so much of that is because of tourists. And we also found that tourism is really an important and growing source of middle-class jobs for New York. But what I'll skip to is just that, I think we can't rest on our laurels. This is one of those industries that I think we all don't grasp how big it is, but it also could be lost. And given that it is the 4th most important sector in the city's economy, we need to do things to take care of it, to groom it, and to make sure we don't lose what we have. I'm just going to go over a couple of quick suggestions, if I may. I give a lot of credit to NYC and Company. I think they've been a great tourism promotion agency, probably one of the best, if not the best in the world. I think, though, that what our report shows is that we also need help from other agencies, planning, economic development. We feel like we've never adequately planned for a city that has 60 million plus tourists a year. You know, there's things like where do all the tour buses go? How do you accommodate that? How do you do a better job of making sure there is the equity and that there is tourism promotion all over the 5 boroughs? Those are things that planning and economic development could be helping with, and we advocate for a 5-year tourism strategy plan that the city should undertake. Let me say one more idea really quickly, and that is that, and I know it came up a little bit earlier, is just that we could do so much more to improve the connections, not only at the airports, and so many people come through our airports, but the connections between the airports and the subway stations. And I know Councilmember Donovan Richards talked about what could be done in Southeast Queens, where there's a major airport in New York City. You know, our report talks about how that connection at the Jamaica subway station, which has something like 6 million tourists a year, people come off the air train, they change at the Jamaica subway station. This is such an easy thing. Right now, it is a pretty disgusting transfer to the subway station. There's no signage, there's nothing that makes you feel welcoming. This is often people's first taste of a New York City subway. It's often the first taste of New York City outside of an airport, and we do nothing to make it like an arrival place for New York City. Not only can we have like signage that welcomes people, but what about a video loop or some kind of LED signage about what's happening in Jamaica? Let's tell them who are those famous people that are from Jamaica a few feet from where they're standing right there, right? You know, there's opportunities to do that. And you know, as Councilmember Menchaca was talking about the Red Hook terminal earlier, we could do the same thing there for Red Hook and have those kind of local linkages about, okay, you're getting off the boat, the cruise ship in Red Hook, what could we do for the local community there? I think there's a lot of those opportunities around the city, and we've only just begun to look at them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And you can see where most of our notes came from, so we appreciate your report and guidance.
So first of all, I just want to say also great piece in Cranes today, and thank you for all your leadership on this. Also, in addition to being the chair of the Times Square Alliance, I was the co-chair of the New York City Bid Association, where I was constantly hearing from the 75 bids throughout all 5 boroughs about that are marketing their neighborhoods and their commercial strips, that they were interested in nurturing this kind of tourism. So I know that this is a huge thing. We know that Times Square, the tourism plays a role in Times Square's economy, but you know, I think what we've all been talking about is how much of a difference it could make beyond sort of Midtown as well. And for Times Square, you know, sure, people are going to come here for the first trip, but it's good for us. If there were like a cultural and cuisine tourism package or the kind of thing that you're talking about, that's marketed to people, we get these mailers from Ontario, there's ads in Penn Station from Baltimore. If we're doing that same thing, even just sort of locally, to get people to come down and do, you know, their second trip or their third trip to New York City, those people might go to a Broadway show. It's good for the entire economy of the city, and on so many different levels. And I think that the dashboard is really, really important in a few things. With respect to the equity issue, I think one thing is this really core question that Carlos asked about, which is just like, what's the baseline of where money is being spent? And I'm sorry, but this data does exist. We've bought it. It's not perfect. It's approximation, Visa or MasterCard. You can go buy this, and you can get it by zip code. We did that. We did a little experiment where we bought that information from Bed-Stuy, Clinton Hill, and Prospect Heights, and then for Brooklyn and Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, because we bought it for Times Square. We wanted to know what's our baseline. What they do is they say, it's disaggregated, it's anonymous, but it says X percentage of the spending, Visa spending, which is a pretty good approximation for overall spending, came from zip codes beyond the New York metropolitan area. And that's your baseline. And we found that in Bed-Stuy, Clinton, and Prospect Heights, and then when we did a separate one for Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, 20% of retail and restaurant spending, for example, with Visa was from people visiting. And sometimes it might have been those family and friends visiting, sometimes it might have been other people, but that's where you establish a baseline. The other, so one of the equity things is how to get the folks that are coming to Times Square on their first trip or their second trip or third trip to go out to some of the neighborhoods where that economic activity isn't happening, and making sure that it's not disruptive to sort of the communities that are there, but sort of is building on things. The other is, how do we make sure that folks who have not had economic opportunities to get plugged into the pipeline of jobs with the hundreds of thousands of hotel and other retail and restaurant jobs, how do we make sure there's a connection between sort of communities where there's a need for greater employment opportunities with this job creation machine, which is now greater than finance, or manufacturing. In terms of jobs, it's the fourth largest job producer. And so those are the things where you can also buy data where you can figure out what are the industries, and because we did this for ourselves, we said, for people who work in Times Square, where in New York City do they live? And then you could sort of say, okay, well, if they're working in retail, and we know that in the case of Times Square, 50% of retail jobs are driven by tourist spending, then you can say that 50% of jobs are affected in this particular neighborhood by what's going on with tourism. So there's a way to do it, and that's why the dashboard is needed, to look at this kind of thing. And then you have a baseline to see if you're moving the needle by doing these promotional programs. And then you also see, which people do all the time, you can also see, okay, if we invest in this promotion and we do a buy, Nycc company does amazing work. If you do a buy in Toronto, how many clicks do you get? What kind of return do you get for sort of the Solo Portland tour? And that's a way to show that you're getting a return on your investment. As a member of New York City and Company, I think they do amazing, amazing work. I think it's amazing that Fred is willing to answer all these questions about these things that really sort of go beyond his scope as a marketing person. Obviously, they should be at the table, but as everyone has said, it's EDC, it's Small Business Services, it's DOT, it's City Planning. Those are the entities that also need to be thinking about this as an economic engine that drives the city. That's really, really important, and that there's an integrated strategic multi-year plan. As it was mentioned, among the top 10 US destination cities, New York is the only one that doesn't dedicate a portion of that hotel tax. So there's a huge hotel tax. It adds up to 1.1 billion in tax receipts. But that money does, in every other of the top 10 destination cities, some of that money is channeled back into sort of tourism promotion and marketing. And that's what we think is, establish a baseline and capture that money, because those numbers have gone up hugely. Like, just during the last 10 years, those taxes grew by 74%, but the city's contribution to Nycc and Company decreased by 19%. That's what we're saying. Those numbers have gone way, 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 way up over the last 15 or 20 years. Just take a slice of that and reinvest it. And why do we need to reinvest? Because we all know that if you don't continue to update and improve your user experience, and you don't market, even if you're a market leader, you're dying. So in the spirit of retro, I've got this thing, this old BlackBerry. Remember when they dominated the market, but they didn't work on improving the user experience? You get the tab, right? That's right. You don't work on improving your user experience, and you don't work on continuing to market even when you're at the top of the market. And Apple has done that. They're still spending money on ads. They're still doing upgrades. Then you stay on top. We can't assume that it's just going to stay this way all the time. Thank you.
Great prop. Are you still using the market? More impressive. Thomas, Charlotte has changed.
Yes, apologies. So the president of the Broadway League, Charlotte St. Martin, was here ready to testify, but unfortunately she wasn't able to stay. So I'm Tom Ferrugia. I'm the director of governmental affairs for the league, and I'm going to read portions of her statement for time. Just to reiterate, we are the Broadway League. We're the trade association for the commercial theater industry. So my testimony is going to be specifically about the economic impact of Broadway, the tourism impact of Broadway, and some of the things that the city might be able to do to help some of the businesses in the area. Thank you for holding the hearing. We want to acknowledge Councilman Powers, who represents Times Square and is our council member, so thank you. I'll just jump right into the numbers. So each year we host millions of travelers from all over the globe. I'm talking specifically about Broadway, who come to attend a live show. Of the 13.8 million Broadway theater tickets sold in the season ending of 1 year season ending 2018, 8.6 million of those 13.8 million tickets were purchased by people residing outside of New York City. That includes 2 million international visitors. Broadway's cumulative fiscal impact on New York City was almost 13 billion, 12.8 billion to be exact. 9.8 derived from audience spending, and that does not include the cost of the theater ticket. We exclude that when we determine our economic impact from audience spending. 2.8 billion from show investment, and approximately 45.7 million from capital improvements. Collectively, Broadway employs 12,600 individuals who are mostly union members, actors, directors, ushers, electricians, stagehands, and musicians, and many more. And ancillary spending by our patrons supports an additional 74,500 full-time jobs in restaurants, hotels, shops, and livery services. Broadway has a long history of partnering with New York City. The council is a generous sponsor of our Family First Nights program, which provides a series of unique theatrical events to underserved families. Your support on our New Broadway Bridges program, which is endeavoring to ensure that every New York City public high school student attends a Broadway show before graduation, which will, when fully implemented, will mean 70,000 kids per year. The League also sponsors Broadway Week, administered by NYC & Co., which is a semi-annual event, encourages theater attendance by offering 2-for-1 tickets to popular shows. We also work closely with the Mayor's Office in Media and Entertainment in many, many ways, and just by example, recently we partnered to promote Broadway-related PSAs on Taxi TV. So, despite several high-profile successes, a surprising 4 out of 5 Broadway shows failed to recoup their capitalization and close within 1 year. Broadway productions are incredibly risky and expensive, and primarily supported by groups of individual investors who put their own money at stake. Despite reported strong attendance and grosses, the numbers don't change with regard to profitability. Rising production costs and attracting capital is an extraordinary challenge. Going forward, we would encourage the council to support legislation that removes economic barriers to meeting operating expenses, recurring capital, and advertising productions. I'm almost finished. This includes Introductory Bill 1107 of 2017, having to do with commercial rent tax. We would also encourage a strong review of commercial rent tax. We find it progressive that a small pocket of all of New York City pays a tax that no other business in the entire city is required to pay on top of their normal property taxes. We will also encourage continued policies to promote access to Times Square and alleviate obstacles and disincentives to visiting Midtown, such as it was discussed, oversight of many street activities. It turns out that Times Square though it represents a very small portion of the entire footprint of New York City, has a massive disproportionate amount of street fairs that take place there, which causes a tremendous amount of congestion, and we get a lot of complaints from our customers that they were unaware these events were taking place and had trouble accessing the venues. So again, because of time, I'll just jump to it. I thank you for this opportunity, and we are available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Make sure you give Charlotte our regards and for the testimony. And congratulations on your acknowledgments here from the council.
Thank you.
No, we have one more.
Yes, I'm Melissa Diaz. I am Director of Government Affairs at the American Museum of Natural History. You may be familiar with the museum already, but for context, just wanted to provide a brief overview, being mindful of time. We first want to thank the committee for your ongoing support over the years. The museum could not have grown as much as it has over these past few decades without all of your help, so we thank you for that. The museum and the city have actually had a long-standing partnership since 1869, our founding almost 150 years ago. We'll be celebrating our 150th next year. We have evolved to a 25-building complex of 1.6 million square feet. We have scientific staff of over 200 people who are engaged in cutting-edge research, and that brings graduate students, postgraduate students, pre-K, all ages, seniors, that sort of thing, to our development programs and our on-site public programming. We are a member of the CIGs, which is a diverse coalition of 33 nonprofit organizations. We represent museums, performing arts, centers, zoos, gardens in all 5 boroughs, and we often sit on city-owned or operated parkland. The museum itself generates $1.32 billion per year in economic activity. We employ over 1,300 people, over 1,000 of whom are New York City residents and live in the 5 boroughs. 1 in 3 of our employees are union members. Our unions include the Local 3, 1539, and DC 37. The museum attracts one of the nation's largest and most diverse audiences, welcoming over 5 million visitors on site. And in the last fiscal year, we welcomed about 500,000 children and chaperones through school and camp groups alone. Our institution contributes to the city's economy and the city's tax base. Every dollar that we receive in city support is worth a $27 economic impact on the city. We also have a ripple effect that supports local businesses like print shops, mailing centers, caterers, contractors. In fiscal 18, we spent over $64 million on contractual services with over 1,100 New York City-based vendors, again, from all 5 boroughs. That doesn't take into account the impact we have on restaurants, shops, and neighborhood businesses. We work with things like the Columbus Avenue bid to make sure that we are contributing to our local economies as well. Our educational impact is felt worldwide. We have teachers who we prepare throughout the city to have the skills necessary to develop our next generation of scientists and technologists through programs like Urban Advantage, which has existed since 2004 because of a public-private partnership involving the DOE and 8 of our city's leading scientific institutions, many of which are in Queens. The partnership has facilitated a model science education program that connects public schools, teachers, and students with authentic science experiences. Urban Advantage is serving 915 teachers, over 93,000 students, and 294 middle schools throughout the city. At a time when the state of science education is of grave concern, we are incredibly proud of Urban Advantage's success and its growing role to develop the next generation of scientists. We also have the only PhD program in any museum in the Western Hemisphere, and our Masters of Science Earth Science program, which produces 1/3 of nearly all certified Earth Science teachers in New York State. Next, we will start our work on the Richard Gilder Center for Science Education and Innovation, which will have a total economic impact of $700 million for the city. Over the construction period, the expansion will generate over 500 full-time equivalent jobs, and it will contribute an estimated $30.1 million in tax revenues for the city. We collaborate with the city, whether it is on making the Gilder Center happen or our educational programs happen every year. So we do thank you for the opportunity to testify and tell you more about our programming.
Thank you, Melissa. And it wasn't that long ago, the night at the museum, I was sleeping over with my kids. It was one of the greatest nights. I know, but my kids were much younger at that time. And I was a hero for sleeping over under the whale that night. But thank you all for your testimony. Again, you clearly see that this hearing was really based on the work that you have done, and we're listening. And this is the first step, so we're going to work with you on the next steps, and this is not just one hearing. So thank you very much. Thank you. We have one more panel. Thank you for those who stayed. So we have Vijay Dandapani from the Hotel Association, Rob McKay from the Queens Economic Development Corporation, Eileen Fuchs from Snug Harbor Cultural Center, and Alexandra Silversmith from the Alliance, and one more, Morgan Perlman from the Association for a Better New York. Sorry, Morgan. And we'll be approaching for landing. DJ, if you'd like to start, that's fine.
Got it. All right. Here we go. Greetings, co-chairs Van Bremen and Malone, and Councilmember Keith Powers for putting this forward. I'm Vijay Dandapani, President of the Hotel Association of New York City, and I thank you for this opportunity to present testimony on this very important topic to all of us. Firstly, let me thank Councilman Powers for putting forward this idea of a dashboard. I think it's just a brilliant idea. Of course, the dashboard has to be indicative of what's beneath it, and it's really important that the metrics that it displays is a cohesive effort and a collaborative effort of all those who testified before me and those who have succeeded. So the Hotel Association is one of the oldest associations, trade associations in the country, and the oldest hotel association in the country. Founded in 1878, we represent an overwhelming majority of hotels in New York City. And we are the voice of the hotel industry in supporting a diverse group of owners, operators, and employees in some of the finest establishments that the city has. Once again, we're delighted to be a part of this initiative of the City Council, and we look forward to participating in contributing to the development of a sound and expanded tourism policy that results in an even stronger and vibrant tourism sector. New York City is the US's third largest market for hotels, with nearly 600 hotels and 115,000 rooms. Fred Dixon and Donna Karan alluded to some of those metrics and how they've grown since the Great Recession. Our members account for almost 70% of those rooms, and last year New York City hotels rented 38 million room nights, bringing in several $1 billion in revenue. And we as an industry are a significant contributor to the city's economy, both economically and socially. The total taxes that we paid, Jim Tompkins mentioned 1.1 billion. That's the sales and occupancy tax, but if you add the real property taxes, which by the way have doubled since the recession, exceed $2 billion. So unlike many other industries which underwent significant layoffs after the Great Recession, we had almost no layoffs. Yes, notably the Waldorf Astoria closed, but as you know, the workers were all union workers and they were compensated per the union contract. So in fact, the period between 2008 and now has seen the number of jobs in the hotel industry increase by nearly 30% to a total of 55,000 jobs. But I must caution, Fred did bring out the issue of high occupancy rates, but he also alluded to the fact that rates are not where they were. In fact, adjusted for inflation, we are 20% below the Great Recession. While our other costs have increased pretty dramatically, including, as I just said, real property taxes. We've worked with the Mayor's Office to partner with the New York City Center for Youth Employment. And it's an initiative that seeks to enable summer-long internships for high-achieving New York City high school or college students. And we've made every effort with all our members to make sure that there are hundreds of employers who participate in it. We value the symbiotic relationship with many of the key players, Times Square Alliance, Broadway League, and a whole host of others who are our tourism cohorts. And we really see that in how we work together in enabling tourism to the city. We're also a supporter of a high-tech incubator, Voyager HQ, for the past 2 years. The event has been held every year in the fall for highly innovative tech solutions for the hospitality industry, both from established companies as well as new frontier tech startups like using blockchain technology. We look forward to partnering and continue to expand this program, such as the NYC Youth Employment Partnership. And let me just close by saying a couple of things. Infrastructure came up repeatedly. New York City has great cultural heritage and, of course, attractions, both man-made and human-made, as well as natural. But on infrastructure, there's one element that was not touched upon. Javits, when it was built, was already below the capacity that we needed. Even the expanded Javits, I would testify, is not going to be adequate. The template we should use is another destination city like London. That's who we compete with, major worldwide cities, and they have 2 convention centers, one XL outside the city of London and Earl's Court, which is their Javits, if you will. That's something the Building Congress and I have talked about, and we look to expand on that as well. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all for this opportunity. I don't get to do it every day. Thank you, Chairman Vallone. Hi, Jimmy. Everything I wanted to say has already been covered pretty much, but let me just tell you about myself. My name is Rob Mackay. I work for the Queens Economic Development Corporation. My boss is Seth Bornstein, who you might know. About 7 years ago, we came up with the idea of founding the Queens Tourism Council, which I now run. And it started off just making phone calls to different people and getting rejections, but we've built ourselves up to right now. We have about 50 members. Exactly 50%, I would say. 25 of them are hotels. The other members are everything you can imagine. We have the big ones like Resorts World, Mets, USTA. We have the other ones like Museum of Moving Image and Queens Museum, Queens Theater. And we go all the way right down to the historic houses and the Oratorio Society of Queens, which is actually quite good. We do all of our promotions through the It's in Queens brand. Website is itsinqueens.com. Twitter is #itsinqueens. Facebook.com/itsinqueens. Instagram.com/itsinqueens.
And I even wore our It's in Queens t-shirt today, which you could buy for $10, a very good price. It would match very well with your tie, I might add, Mr. Bowen. Saying all that, I spend my days, I take tours of writers and travel agents on tours of the borough. I go to conferences like Powwow, where you talk to other people in the industry. I have a weekly column of events, of what's going on in the borough. We also do a weekly Thursday morning e-blast about what's going on in the borough. We organize events such as Queens Taste. Plus, Queens has its own restaurant week. There's a New York City company that does a restaurant week, but the price point's a little bit high for our borough, so we do our own, which is actually 3 weeks because the restaurants are so good in Queens. 1 week isn't enough. So that's kind of what I do. We're basically, for all intents and purposes, we're a line item on the Queens Economic Development Corporation's budget. But we've been able to do a lot with little because we work with New York City Company, which provides us with a lot of these journalists and whatnot. And its foundation funds us, plus the Queensborough president gives us some money and gives us free office space, which is very important. In terms of Queens Tourism Council and the Queens Economic Development Corporation, we are both very much in favor of this legislation and happy to work with you however you want. And we're also happy to get more involved with the City Council in general on other initiatives that involve tourism. We do work with the bids. We do work with a lot of agencies that receive city money. And so, why not jump into the larger pool? I want to also tell you a little story about what we're doing right now. I knew I was going to run out of time. All right, we got $112,000 from the state, which is the Empire State Development Corporation. It's basically the I Love New York campaign for this past year, okay? We created 5,000 copies of Queens in Your Pocket, which is a guidebook that tells you all about everything that's going on in the borough. We did a culinary thing about the restaurants with Culinary Backstreets, which is a really good Asian private sector company. If you ever want to go to Athens or Istanbul or Barcelona, they have great books on where to eat. We did a photo called A Great Day in Queens about the borough, where we got 133 different immigrants together to take a photo, which mimics a famous photo about jazz greats that was taken in 1958. This was taken by that photographer's son. We've been promoting it through a poster and other ways. We also have, with that money, we did a pull-out section in the Daily News on the Rockaways. We started a weekly podcast. We took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal's travel magazine, which comes out in October. We took another one in USA Today, which has the same thing. And we had a kiosk at the US Open where we gave away stuff for the entire 2 weeks. That was with $112,000. Just imagine if you can fund small nonprofit agencies, you can get a lot done in the tourism sector. And I know I'm way over time, so thank you very much, and I will happily pass my mic.
Well, it's a tough act to follow. Good afternoon, chairs and committee. My name is Eileen Fuchs. I'm the president and CEO of Snug Harbor Cultural Center and Botanical Garden in Staten Island. Thank you for inviting our testimony. Snug Harbor is an historic complex of 26 buildings, 14 gardens, wetlands, parklands, a farm, multiple organizations on 83 acres. We are a proud member of the CIG, Smithsonian affiliate, and the cultural anchor of Staten Island. We offer programming in arts, life sciences, horticulture, and agriculture. Snug Harbor is a property manager, home to the Staten Island Museum, Staten Island Children's Museum, Noble Maritime Collection, other organizations, and 40+ small businesses and artists. We are the borough's only botanical garden. We are Staten Island's backyard and a source of tremendous community pride. Our campus welcomes upwards of 400,000 visitors each year to our gardens, galleries, schools, and museums. Our site employs more than 250 people, making it collectively the largest cultural organization on Staten Island. Using statistics from Americans for the Arts, we estimate our economic impact at $17.6 million per year and nearly $1 million in local tax revenue. Snug Harbor has developed strong relationships with public and private partners, including the Borough President's Office, Department of Transportation, NYC & Co., and the Empire Outlet Mall to maximize economic opportunity on the North Shore. We are located in the Staten Island Opportunity Zone, which is a high-poverty area undergoing revitalization. We aim to grow our visitorship from beyond the local area with positive impact on local businesses, stimulating economic development. Increasing our visitorship by just 10% would generate an additional $1.5 million in economic impact for our very underserved North Shore community. To get there, we need investment in transportation infrastructure to improve our access from the Staten Island Ferry and infrastructure to upgrade our own security, safety, and wayfinding on our site and improve the visitor experience. Snug Harbor's ability to attract tourism is evident. Last night, in partnership with the New York Events and Entertainment, we opened the first annual NYC Winter Lantern Festival, which will run through January 6th. To date, more than 30,000 tickets have been sold. The press has been tremendous. That's huge, huge for us. The festival is the official event of the China National Tourist Office New York 2018 and will be highlighted at the Empire Outlets Mall, which is providing shuttle service to and from the site. We see this as an opportunity to introduce new audiences to the magic of Snug Harbor. Snug Harbor is the major cultural attraction on Staten Island's North Shore, drawing residents from across the borough, New York City, and surrounding communities, and an increasing number of domestic and international tourists, numbers which will only grow with the opening of the Empire Outlets Mall and hotels in nearby St. George, which has been referenced today. Valuable city investment to date has brought new life, new energy, and interest to Snug Harbor. It brought me to Snug Harbor. Further investment in Snug Harbor and in North Shore transportation infrastructure will provide our community with new jobs and new opportunities as we strengthen our position and our mission to become a nationally visible and locally impactful cultural destination. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Alexandra Silversmith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Coney Island. Our nonprofit represents a lot of the small businesses, or I should say all, as well as all the large stakeholders in Coney Island, Nathan's, Luna Park, Dina's Wonder Wheel, the aquarium, the cyclones, I can go on and on. But as you actually might have noticed, we did not come up today, which I was actually quite shocked in the testimony by EDC and NYC & Co. So all the more reason that I'm going to use this to advocate and also strongly support the use of a dashboard, because it's very hard for us to measure visitorship. Unlike other places, we have no gates. And so all of our visitorship is really based on the MTA. And the MTA likes to open their gates on our high business days like July 4th and let everybody in for free. So I'm here today because we believe that it is essential for the city to support us as we continue the growth of our amusement district. As a growing destination, we are evolving and continuously have our amusement district adding new attractions to the landscape. While they are all marketing their entities, there is a clear need for marketing support and inclusion in New York City marketing campaigns. Alongside our growing attractions, we see an increase in foreign tourism to the area, which points to a need for the city to further market and attract foreign visitors to take the subway down to Coney Island. Our amusement community, made up of primarily family-owned businesses, has grown to include new venues like the Ford Amphitheater and welcomed the expansion of integral cultural establishments like the New York Aquarium. Many of these businesses are legacy businesses, meaning they have been in Coney Island surviving some of the rougher times, rebuilding after Superstorm Sandy, and pushed through to be part of the Coney Island you see today. We continue to face a challenging perception of crime and safety, and I believe the city can help tremendously by increasing the visibility of all Coney Island has to offer and improving our image for New Yorkers and visiting tourists through marketing support. Simultaneously, while we continue to push growth and expand the opportunities in Coney Island, we face many challenges with transit access. While we are excited to have development on so many of the vacant lots that have plagued our landscape for decades, we are losing areas that have been used for parking and are seeing a dire need for a multi-level parking lot to meet the demand. While we continue to push public transportation to alleviate this need, we are a beach destination, and that type of destination brings more baggage, literally, than any other cultural destination in New York City. Public transportation also hinders our growth as we are at the mercy of the MTA, and on average, a ride from Lower Manhattan takes over an hour on a good day, thus deterring visitors from visiting, and they can't allot as much time to get down there. So we have been advocating for F Express train service as well as the implementation of ferry service, both of which we believe are desperately needed to provide transit alternatives and enable visitors to reduce travel time so they can experience the nostalgia and beauty of our neighborhood. The last thing I will mention, because I know I'm out of time, is just workforce talent, and it came up with NYC & Co. But we have been struggling to build partnerships. We have hundreds of jobs. This year, the Parks Department said we had over 7 million visitors, but we have not created a talent pipeline to really tap into that opportunity. And we think that there's a big opportunity for college students, especially since we're more seasonal, to really build that relationship and leverage those jobs. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Angela Pinsky. I'm the Executive Director for the Association for Better New York. Thank you for allowing us to testify. So earlier this year, ABNY partnered with Times Square Alliance to support and sponsor the Center for Urban Future Study, Destination New York. And really, I just want to echo a lot of the things that both Jonathan and Tim have mentioned, and our support for the dashboard and our support for more comprehensive planning. But really why Abney was interested in the study was because year over year, we saw the record number of tourists come in for nearly 2 decades. And the question occurred to us as we saw these conversations about growth, both in the residential and in the employment sector, as those were also hitting record highs. What is this growth really doing to the city? 60 million people coming to the city is a great opportunity for economic revenue and for supporting our local cultural and retail and businesses and other institutions. But are we planning for it appropriately? What are the demands that these people bring to the city on our public realm and our transportation infrastructure and our other infrastructure? And are we really making the most of these opportunities that they bring by having all these additional people come? So really we thought it would be interesting to look at those questions. The report, which it sounds like you guys know better than I do, the findings are generally that the tourism industry is a bigger part of our economy than we previously thought. That the growth of the tourism industry doesn't just support our traditional tourism institutions, but it has spurred growth in related sectors, including travel tech, which we find really exciting, and transportation. The tourism sector is a vital source of not only employment, but good paying jobs and jobs that have a ladder for people to advance on. So it's a vital part of our employment economy. And our concern also was that the tourism industry is also subject to and very sensitive to changes. We've seen in the past what a strong dollar and a weak dollar does to the influx of international tourism. And we also, at the time of engaging on the study, were concerned about what the national sentiment was going to do to our local economy. So I think that it's important for us to be aware that now that the tourism sector is such a big portion of our economy, that fluctuations downward are also very dangerous for us, in addition to the amount of pressures that are created with the growth. So a couple of recommendations in the report that were already touched upon, but the need to strategically plan for growth in this sector. The city should create multidimensional plans and strategies for the impacts of the sector in the same comprehensive way that it approaches affordable housing and economic development. There needs to be a strengthening of the integration of tourism initiatives with other city efforts and other city agency initiatives and planning, and increasing the priority of improving the tourism experience from wayfinding to airports to translation services. There are ways to improve the accessibility of the city, and sometimes it's just minor adaptations. So we are all very excited that this industry keeps growing, but we are also excited about the opportunity to work with you to plan for the sector.
Well, before the panel goes, thank you. Just want to have some closing statements by our council members. Councilman Powell.
Sure. I want to ask first a question, and then I'll make our closing statement. I have left it me, but I just wanted to ask. There was to VJ and for the hotel folks. There was a recommendation earlier, or an idea. I think Tim brought it up, and others did too. About, I think you didn't say we should definitely do it, but we should look at dedicating a portion of the hotel taxes, the revenue generated from hotels towards tourism and in general, New York City Company or something like it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we strongly encourage that. Just don't raise the tax, council member. History has taught us one thing: don't repeat mistakes from the past. If you recall, just before the advent of the Giuliani administration, New York City had the highest. It still is the highest, but it was the highest tax structure for any city in the country. So we lopped off 5% from that, and there's almost we know correlation is not causation, but there's a clear correlation between the drop in that hotel tax and the increases that we got. So the general funds is a logical place to go, and earmark for by all means. We're big supporters of Nycc and Company and what Fred does. We think he does a remarkable job. Certainly, this Coney Island aspect is something we should look into it if it was missed. But we think that's where the money should be going, to enhance the ability to attract tourists.
And one last question is: you mentioned the rates declining or declining in terms of, or,
Well, the rates haven't gone up. The main issue.
why? Tell us why.
Well, there's two reasons. One reason is supply growth, but the other reason is there's a shadow inventory of almost 110,000 rooms. And if you recall in my testimony, I said there are 115,000 rooms in the city. There's 110,000 in Airbnb, HomeAway, and One Fine Stay, and a few others that are in this mix. You go to Booking.com and you'll see 2,000 listings for New York City. We all know that there simply aren't 2,000 hotels, and that is the problem. They tend to shy away from the limelight, unlike Airbnb. Airbnb almost spoils for a fight, but these guys are equally culpable, if not bigger.
They pay hotel taxes?
No, they don't. No. And they don't pay real property taxes. As I said, our real property taxes have gone up 100%. There's a huge arbitrage. I call it regulatory arbitrage, where you're catering to the same marketplace, but you don't have the same rules, ADA, fire safety, and wages. So.
Okay, thanks.
And our co-chair, Jimmy Memory.
Just because, of course, we have a 4 o'clock at City Hall, I just want to say thank you to all of you for doing this, and I think it was a great hearing and a great partnership between the three of us, and Rob, you wearing that shirt just made it perfect. So.
I can get you one. I think you already have one, don't you?
You live about 50 feet from me. You gotta get me one.
With that, a big thank you to TWU, big thank you to the staff and to the panelists for staying. This is just the first step, so God bless everyone and happy holidays.
Students, more.